Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
My name is Kaysen.
We are here once again to talk with you about Vagrant Story.
Yes.
Maybe for the last time.
We'll see.
Maybe for the last time. We have the timer going here, so we'll get right into it. But yeah, like the first half of it's hard to explain. Like the second half of the story is spread over way more game than the first half of the story is.
And you just get little bits in between tons of boss fights.
Yes.
Tons of them.
There is so much game breaking up all the stuff that we'll be talking about today. It is not half of the game we're covering. It's the second half of the story we're covering, which is way more of the game. And I know that that's been tough for some of the viewers because they're like, I can't play through that much in a week kind of a deal.
Yeah.
We're figuring out how to address this. Each game kind of calls for a little bit of a different approach to how we tackle it.
And we are not going to do a play-by-play of the rooms and the puzzles and the dungeons.
There's no reason to do that.
The bosses.
So I apologize.
Yeah,
you might have to
Sorry.
break up your playthrough of a couple weeks and come back or something. Yeah. And in future games, I'll try to break it down better. But hopefully in future games, they won't have Matsuno gameplay to story ratios.
Most games aren't this bad. They aren't this difficult.
We played 2 Matsuno games in a row.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how he does things, right? It's just there's a lot of game and very little story in that particular section of the game. Yep. So hopefully it won't be an issue with whatever the next game is as of right now, but this will come out in 2 weeks, so I don't know yet. Final Fantasy X and Chrono Cross are in the lead. Okay, so let's get right into this.
All right.
The first cutscene after where we left off last time is Ashley following Samantha and Guildenstern into a little courtyard, and he's sort of spying on them or listening into their conversation. She's commenting about how Kildane glyphs are all over the walls of the city.
Yeah.
And Guildenstern responds, these are spell songs. Leamond is surrounded by sorcery. You'll likely find them on every den and dovecote in the city. This city, it is unchanged these past 2,000 years. Neither the eroding walls nor the quake have sapped its strength. The dark is strongest towards the center, the great cathedral. So in the center of the city is the great cathedral. This is kind of where like the final dungeon is.
Yeah,
it's all leading into there, right? I have felt it. The entire city is a circle of magic. We were joking around. The city itself is a transmutation.
A transmutation circle. That is exactly what I put here. I did not check which one came first.
Oh, which game or the manga for Full Metal Alchemist came first. Yeah, if you haven't seen Full Metal Alchemist, they draw transmutation circles. That's how the magic in their world works, right?
Yep, and I believe something very similar to this does happen at some point.
Well, I think we already have seen it. Like, there's that scene where Hardin and Merlose...
in Full Metal Alchemist, something very similar to a whole city.
Yeah. A little bit earlier...
Ooh, this came first. Vagrant Story came first.
Really?
Yeah,
before
published
the manga?
2001.
There you go.
By Enix, by the way. Square Enix. A lot of people don't know this. Square Enix publishes manga as well as a bunch of video games.
Interesting.
But by 1 year, this one came first.
But Sydney was kind of drawing on the floor, right? And like Hardin's talking to him, and then that big circle glows, and then there's all that magic, and the wind is rushing.
Yeah, the big circle with the writing. I tried to look into the writing. I couldn't recognize anything there. But they're talking about sigils, right? Like this sigil is like the words you write become like a symbol that's like a sigil that can either summon a boss or that can lock doors and things like that. But it's all writing, basically.
Similar concept as in Full Metal Alchemist, and it looks like Vagrant Story came 1 year before. 1 year before. Okay, so Rosencrantz is like on the other side listening in, and he starts mocking Guildenstern for just figuring this out.
He's like, everyone already knows, which is basically what he said to us, too. So he shows up, and he's pretending to us, oh, everyone knows, you're the only one that doesn't know. Then he goes to Guildenstern and says, oh, everyone already knows this, what are you doing? And it's like, okay, whatever Rosencrantz says is probably not true in that regard. The way he says everyone knows. It's like,
right.
well, you mean
Probably
like two
only-
people know?
Well,
maybe
the
three.
Mullenkamp dudes maybe know. Because he does mention later that he learned all this
Yeah.
by spying on Mullenkamp and becoming friends with some of them, right? And that's when he decided to, like, basically he was done with the VKP in Parliament. He was going to use
Right,
them.
he was sent here in one capacity, and he slowly, as he says, he
Yeah.
met new friends, and he
Right.
kind of changed a little bit as things went.
So he probably knows, and maybe he reported some of it to the
So
VKP.
Guildenstern has not been able to extract anything, any information from the Mullenkamp
Maybe,
followers.
well, I don't know. That's a good question. Because
'Cause I would guess that they don't
Grissom
quite
was
know
trying to
either.
like interrogate that guy, and he wouldn't answer him, right?
Yeah, that guy spit in his face, yeah.
So they're like willing to die for Sydney, right?
That's
So-
true, and Sydney's got a hold on them, on their minds.
Right.
But that's pretty good hold.
And
pretty good.
if the VKP knows some of what Rosencrantz knows, if he had reported it,
Yeah.
they're not going to share that information with the cardinal,
Right,
most
right.
likely. So I don't know. It's hard to say. But Guildenstern is like learning about this and apparently did not know, just like Ashley did not know a lot of these
Yes.
things.
And he is very upset about it.
And he's pissed. He's pissed at Rosencrantz.
Yeah. He says the line, "The Grand Grimoire is the city."
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. But also, it gives the idea that the city is like a book that you can read.
Mm-hmm.
And like in some ways, that's so true, especially a city like Saint-Emilion in France,
Yeah.
right, where you can walk around and it's like a story. It's like you're in a story, you know. And I haven't been there personally, but I've seen the pictures, and I can imagine just like being there would be similar to, especially how old it is and the way the buildings look. It's like it's almost like you're reading a storybook as you would walk through an old village like that.
Yeah,
I've
right.
been in old villages like it, especially in Japan, and that is kind of what it's like.
Yeah.
You know, I love the
It's
comparison.
like a storybook coming
Yeah,
to
it's
life.
like a book. It's like you're reading the city.
Yeah. So Guildenstern tries to use some of his like manipulation or mind control power kind of thing on Rosencrantz, but it just like bounces off him.
Now,
And-
to the end of this game, I don't understand why.
I think, well,
Rosencrantz is immune to the darkness, more or less, and I don't know why.
everybody is sort of exhibiting different kinds of powers,
Ah.
right? Guildenstern seems to have the same like compelling power that Sidney's got it all, right?
Oh,
But
you're right.
Guildenstern seems to have that.
Yeah, some people can
Ashley-
read hearts.
Yeah, Ashley and Hardin and even Merlose have that seer
Right,
power.
they have vision. That's true.
And Samantha even has that a little bit. Anyways, it seems to like
Samantha does, but Merlose has an even different power closer to Sydney's in terms
Yeah.
of that we'll see later.
It's-
But
it's-
yeah, you're right. They're different.
it seems like different aspects or different maybe portions of what the dark's full power is emerging in people slowly.
Yeah.
But only the one who inherits like the role Sydney has, right,
Yeah.
is the one who gets all of it. I would think would
Yes.
be that. That would be my theory on that.
But so is one of the powers of the darkness being immune to the other powers of the darkness?
Because Sydney seems to not. I mean, I guess
Well, I think
this
you're
is
right.
this is getting
I think
towards
you're
the
right.
end, but I would think Sydney would have some ability to resist.
I would think so.
Anyways, but there's more to talk about that later.
We'll
with
get to that
Guildenstern.
later,
But in any case, Rosencrantz, this magic is just bouncing off of him, right?
Yes.
And
And
he
also,
says,
he reveals that he was a risk breaker. Like he was.
Yes.
He really was.
He really
Like,
was. He wasn't lying.
I
about
didn't
that.
believe him there. And he's like, I got kicked out, but I used to be a risk breaker. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa.
He-
Okay.
He says, your memory fails you. The dark holds no power over me, nor do
Mm.
I recall us ever being friends. My friendship with the Duke is fleeting as well. So he's just like outwardly saying, like, I'm
going
in
to
it for
betray
myself,
people. Yeah.
and I don't care about any of you.
Well, and that's where Rosencrantz is like, have you no honor? You're
Yeah.
not, you're a sellsword. You're just a
Yeah.
mercenary
Right.
for hire. And, don't you have any principles?
Yeah. So he and Guildenstern are about to fight. That's when Rosencrantz says, you forget I'm a risk breaker here. Like, you
Right.
really want to try and fight me? And as they're getting on the edge of getting ready to fight,
Yeah.
Samantha starts seeing, but she's seeing through Ashley's
Yes.
eyes, who is like right there behind
And-
a wall.
Yes, and as she's seeing, she's hearing herself
Yes.
talking. And
Yes.
she's like, but I'm here. Like, what am I seeing?
really
Like, she's freaking
confusing.
out, yeah.
And so, anyways, that's how she learns that Ashley is like in the area with them, right?
Really close, yeah. She didn't know where, but she could tell he was close.
And Rosencrantz says, or puts this together and says, they are linked. Samantha's rhythm is attuned to his Guildenstern. So it's like, he's around here. The risk breaker is here.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I really liked this part. Like, they decide to leave, right? They walk through that door, and Ashley's following them to the door, and then they just come back through the door
I know,
again.
they just totally trick him.
I loved that.
Yeah.
I loved that because it shows, like, our villains aren't just dumb bad guys like you see in a lot of things, right? Like, they tricked him into following them so they could turn around and just, like, fight him
and
right
just
there.
ambush him, yeah.
I thought that was really great. I really liked that. So Guildenstern basically leaves Rosencrantz to fight us.
And then they use the vertigo shot that you rarely see that in a video game. Mm-hmm. I thought that was pretty cool. But the camera, what would you call it? The camera zooms in while pulling out, right? That was the way that they did it for this one. And it compressed space, and it's right before we fight.
Yep.
And Rosencrantz is like basically, I think he's telling us a little bit more about our past. And then as that is happening, he's like, all right, now I'm going to kill you. Yeah. And it's pretty unsettling, but it's cool. You don't see the camera tricks like that in a video game, especially not a PS1 video game.
I know, right?
Like, that's cool. That's cool.
It's super cool. He goes over a lot of stuff here, though. So he basically breaks down that he and Ashley knew each other for a long time in the past.
Yeah, long time.
That
in fact, he was there.
Yes, when they killed the family.
Trauma happened. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was Rosencrantz and Ashley who were the ones that did that, right? So Rosencrantz tells him that it was him who set up Ashley as the VKP's errand boy, and that he has Ashley to thank for him getting kicked out of the Risk Breakers.
Yeah.
So they were teammates. He helped him get involved with whatever his role now is in the VKP, and then as thanks for that, Rosencrantz gets kicked out because of something that Ashley did. At least that's his side of the story, right?
Probably not even Ashley's fault, but it's like that's the reason.
So anyways, they have the fight. Rosencrantz yields, and then he goes over some dialogue that really fills this hole in.
He has a lip ring, by the way.
He does.
Did you notice that? Yeah.
That little
I didn't know what it was
for
a long time. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it's a lip ring. My gosh, I thought it was something else. I thought he was drooling.
So he says, a shame your skill in the killing arts did not go the way of your memory. And Ashley is confused by the killing arts. What are you talking about? This is referring to kind of what Sydney was referring to. You were an assassin
about
before,
him being an assassin.
And you're remembering your assassination training. It's coming back to you, right?
Yeah.
So they were part of the same unit. When Ashley is still kind of continuing to insist, believing that meant the Kingsguard, that he was formerly a member of the Kingsguard. So he's like, what do you mean same unit?
Is like, what?
Same unit as we were in the Kingsguard? He's like, what are you talking about, Kingsguard? No, he's like, more VKP lies, right?
Yes.
I underestimated the VKP's ability to
their
manipulate.
ability to brainwash and to replace new memories within him. He says that multiple times in the conversation. Yeah. He's like, more VKP lies. Uh-huh. So not only did the VKP make us forget the past, but they installed a fake past into us. Yeah. Right, through, I guess, just brainwashing techniques.
Yeah. And this more or less confirms that Sydney was not lying. It's like Rosencrantz and Sydney.
Yeah, Rosencrantz was there.
Out of the mouth of two witnesses.
Yes, there you go. Exactly. Shall every truth be established? So, but that is so true, though. Once you hear it from a what'd you call it? A non-biased, like an external source that's not involved with the original source. Right. It's like, okay, that's probably true, right? Yeah. Like, we ended up seeing the memory again. Right, yes. But with Rosencrantz there, and Rosencrantz is telling us like, "Hey man, don't worry. They were witnesses. What else were we gonna do? We had to kill all the witnesses." Yep. And basically, Ashley right then and there just kind of passes out and just falls down. Yep. It seems as though that was not his family, but
yes. That is something we're going to debate later.
Yes, his reaction is very heavy to what he just did. So it's like, okay. That's a thing, right? Yeah. But there's a reason for it, and Rosencrantz was completely unaffected by it. Yes. And we were just way too affected by it. Yep. So that's how that scene goes the second time.
Yep. He's just, why why? Tell me why these people had to die, kind of a thing, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
weighed heavily on him. And Rosencrantz even goes into the fact that you weren't the only one that this affected, like what the VKP was doing at the time.
Yes.
He goes into it here. I think
Oh,
wrote this all down.
This was good.
The risk breakers may be the wards of law now, but it was not always so. We were always champions of justice, true, but a justice that served the state alone.
Yes.
We were above the law. We assassinated political enemies of Parliament and sent sharp steel to bloody the civil wars of our neighbors. To the people, we were the knights of law and order. To our enemies, we were the Parliament's hatchet men.
Yep. I like that line right
it's
there.
really good.
Yeah.
Let's see. He goes on to reveal that his motivation now, at this point, right, after leaving the risk breakers, is to use those who used him. So he felt like what he had been made to do, right, was wrong as well. He was trying to justify it in the scene where they actually did the killing. But
he is a person.
Yeah, but he realized but it's more like he hated that he was used than that he hated what he did necessarily, right?
But this is an answer to the previous scene where Guildenstern says, have you no loyalty, have you no honor?
Yeah,
right?
it's like, why would
he? And he's like, I'm not loyal to the group of dogs that runs our country.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not loyal to that group of nothing, like, low lifes.
Yeah, exactly.
Why would I be loyal to them, you know?
And this is where he talks about how during the time when the VKP sent him to spy on Molenkamp that he made some new friends, which is how he learned about the city's power. He learned it from the Molenkamp cult people.
Yeah.
He says, the pawns have seen the game board for what it is. Now there's only one thing left. And Ashley responds, Leamond, the Blades, the VKP, they all want the power it holds. And Rosencrantz says, correct. And dear Sidney holds the only key. I cannot fathom what his intentions are in using you as a vessel for the dark. Regardless, his time is nigh. I loved how, at least for me, my reading of this in this moment immediately turned Sidney into the protagonist of the story.
I know. It was around this time. So between this scene and the skipping one before, the one we ended last podcast on, between those two scenes, you really think differently about Sidney at that point, right? And specifically after we fight with Sidney against, what was his name? Was it Romeo? Who's the other guy?
Oh, Grissom that we fought? Yeah.
When we fight with Sidney against Grissom, and then Sidney, we have that exchange with him, and he says, follow me if you want to learn more or fulfill your destiny, however he puts it. And then at this point, you know, I totally agree that it was pretty quick, but it didn't feel super sudden to me. I don't feel like Sidney changed as a character.
No.
But how I felt towards him did change based on some pretty logical assertions, right? It made a lot of sense.
It was
actually.
the context, the recontextualization of the VKP and the church and that stuff.
And all of a sudden being a rebel against these horrible groups is actually not
good thing.
Such a bad idea. It's like, maybe a bloody revolution is necessary at this point. It doesn't seem like reparable. It doesn't seem like this is a fixable solution or situation.
Felt a little bit like how the first chapter of Final Fantasy Tactics went, where you're initially a knight fighting rogues
for the government,
and then
the good government.
By the end of that chapter, it's totally reversed.
Yes,
and that's kind of what this felt like.
This felt like that, but in a short, compressed period of time.
Right. So I really liked that. It was like all of a sudden, I just was like, oh, Sidney is the protagonist, not even Ashley, who is working for the VKP, has a sketchy past, and all of this is like, it's like Sidney's the actual good guy of the story.
Yes, exactly.
And even his cult doesn't realize that he actually doesn't want what he's telling them he wants, right?
Right.
And Hardin's kind of torn by this.
Hardin has an issue with that.
It's like Sidney is really doing what the Duke wants in the end. And so it's like, this is the point where you start realizing Sidney is the protagonist of the story, even though he's not our viewpoint character, which is really cool. I really, really like that.
Well, we'll talk about how things would have gone were he the viewpoint character, maybe towards the end.
Yeah.
But as it is, it may sound a little bit weird that he is the protagonist, but he's not the viewpoint character. But I actually think this is the right decision to have it to view this through Ashley.
Yeah,
I actually think that makes sense.
After Rosencrantz leaves I kind of like he was like, next time we fight, like I won't yield
hold
so
back,
easily.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this old-timey way of basically saying like, I guess, I don't know how to put this like terminology-wise, but I follow a Twitter account called, oh crap, hold on, let me pull it up. Scrub Quotes.
Oh,
Have you ever read Scrub Quotes?
No, I don't think so.
It's the funniest thing. They basically just post, people like freaking out and being sore losers in fighting games or online multiplayer games and things, and just like, like freaking out. This basically felt like Rosencrantz is a scrub, and he's it's like a scrub quote that he's putting out, but like an old-timey way of saying it, and Ashley like calling him out on it, like, you're a sore loser, Rosencrantz.
Oh yes,
like,
he says that. He literally says that. Yeah, that's so funny. It's like, even though you totally like beat me really bad, and to where he was like on the ground, like out of breath, just like, and you could have killed me. I went easy on you.
I actually would have won. If I was trying, I would have won.
I remember when I was in high school. I was in summer school, actually, because my grades were so bad. And there's this kid next to us. And remember when it was cool to have like a chain on your wallet?
Yeah, I do remember
people would
that.
walk around with the baggy pants and a chain on the wallet,
Yep.
And this guy was like trying to show off how strong he was, and he was like pulling it, and he was like, dude, I could totally break this. And somebody in class was like, go ahead and do it. And he's like, yeah. And he like starts to pull it a little, and he goes, I'll bet you I could if I want to. And he put it back down. And first of all, those things are kind of expensive. So it's like, why would he even be doing this in the first place? Like, are you really going to break your chain for your wallet just because somebody told you to? But then at the same time, he was really going to do it. And then he just chickened out in the worst possible way. Instead of just being like, no, dude, like, that's stupid. He was like trying to show off, but in the end, still kind of trying to keep that upper hand, while at the same time being like, I either can't do this or really shouldn't.
Yeah.
It was so funny.
Yeah. So anyways, I liked that. It was funny. But when he leaves, Ashley ends up saying to himself, lying to ourselves, believing our own lies. So he's sort of coming around on the idea that he's been lying to himself, that he's believed his own lies, and that he needs to, start accepting the truth. So anyways, the next scene is really good too. You have to fight 3 bosses before you get to this part. But when you finally get there, it's Merlose, and he hears her voice kind of like asking for him, like calling out to him, sort of
that's
thing.
right.
And that's when he gets like tuned to her rhythm.
Yeah, and then we kind of like kneel down and just like close our eyes and.
Yeah, and so she's sort of sitting by a door that Hardin had locked with a sigil, and some knights are trying to break through it, but they can't get through. And she's a little startled by that, and then she looks up.
What's crazy is this shows us next to Merlose, right? This is where I finally made the connection that these are not ghosts, right?
Oh, right.
That these are people who are projecting or who are seeing through somebody else, and then they're present. They're there.
Yeah.
So while somebody is seeing through Merlose or someone relevant around there's eyes, the person who is being used can see that person as a ghost.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, kind of.
Is that not how it works?
This is
what
I took
This
is a little confusing. So Ashley is seeing through Merlose, and in the scene, he is in his grayed out form,
and we're like standing there. Yeah, that's how all the ghosts
can't
are.
see Ashley, I don't think. I think what this is implying is that Ashley is present in the scene.
But they didn't need to imply that before.
I
so
agree.
why are they doing it now?
I agree. I now that you've mentioned it, it's something that I think, because in the past they've shown like a first-person perspective as if he's seeing through their eyes.
But even they'll do that initially, but then as Sydney and Hardin have their back and forth, we do see Merlose from a third-person perspective as well.
Yes.
But we're not there,
Right. And also, she starts using a power in this scene that we haven't really seen yet.
Yeah.
That Hardin is in the room physically, the color version of Hardin, who is refusing to answer her questions. But she's able to like read his mind, and then a ghostly form of Hardin will appear, and that's just a representation of his inner thoughts.
Yes.
It's not like a ghost of Hardin. It's just like his.
So the grayed out figure can mean somebody's heart or mind telling, or somebody seeing through someone else, or an actual ghost?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
That's
That's why I feel like that can be kind of
might
confusing.
be an issue I have with this game.
Well, actually, no. Maybe not the ghost part. I can't talk about this yet. It would be a spoiler.
Are any of the grayed out people actual ghosts?
Maybe the boy. Maybe the boy that Ashley saw at the beginning.
Right.
Maybe, but maybe.
Well, we'll talk
he
about
could
that
be.
then.
Maybe he
We'll
could be
talk
a real
about
ghost. The other boy that looks like Joshua that Merlose has been seeing, I don't think is a ghost, and I will talk more about that when we get to that point.
Yeah.
In case we have to split this into 2 episodes, and it would be a spoiler for the final episode.
Well, I'm excited to talk about that that moment, because that's an interesting time.
It's good stuff. Okay. So anyways, Hardin is like standing on a platform above her, right?
Yeah.
And is like, usually I like to summon a guardian to protect the sigils, but this one I made particularly strong, so they're not getting through there. He's revealing in saying that he can summon monsters too, right? So the same thing Grissom did when we fought him, that circle that like dropped the knight in the armor down. That's summoning. Mm-hmm. That's what Sydney's been doing, and Guildenstern was referencing that earlier. Like he's going, but they don't act. These cultists are doing this, but they don't have control over it. Kind of
right. They're just dropping dark monsters everywhere.
Yeah, and eventually they're going to get out of the city, and this is really bad. So Hardin...
And Guildenstern would never let dark power go out of the city.
Right.
Never.
Yeah. So Hardin is revealing he has this power too, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, Joshua appears behind him. This is the first time we've seen him since like the opening scene of the game, really.
Seen him, well, at least conscious. Yeah.
Yes.
This is the first time we've seen him.
The colored version of
the colored version. I know. Yeah.
The physical boy.
Yes.
So he appears from behind him. Merlose is a little startled by that. Because she's been seeing a ghostly figure that looks like this boy. Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is like crazy.
There's the ghost.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
Right? So Hardin describes Joshua as being timorous and not speaking. Like he hasn't spoken a word since he was kidnapped.
And every time we had seen him up to that point, they were basically holding him like a football. Yeah. Right? He was like unconscious completely.
All the excitement has made, it's been a traumatic sort of shock, and so he's not been speaking. But there's like a little bit of, what's the term, where you start falling for the person who kidnapped you.
Oh, Stockholm.
There's a Stockholm syndrome a little bit going on here, where he's like taken to Hardin, and he like likes him.
Yes. Well, quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yes. And Hardin actually has taken to him as well.
Yes.
As we'll see later. But they're kind of like, looking after each other.
Yeah, peanut pod kind of a deal, right?
Yeah.
So she begins to ask him why Molenkamp sees the ducal manor, and Hardin is refusing to give the answer. And all of a sudden, like almost like inherently, she doesn't know how she's doing it, or she didn't mean to do it. She starts to read his thoughts or his heart, right? And this is when like the ghostly version of Hardin appears, but that's just a representation of his inner thoughts, not like a real ghost, right? Right. So
I like how they do that though. So you've got Hardin, and this is, at least in part, this is why I think in this scene Hardin is standing up so high and she's really low, as if he is lording over her, he's like, I'm your boss, I call the shots, I'm the boss, right?
Right.
But then when she reads his heart, right, then it doesn't stay up there. It comes down to be next to her, down. So she's bringing him down. She's bringing the abstract, the spiritual version of Hardin down to her level, where they can actually speak face to face, heart to heart, actually have a normal conversation. But she's bringing him down, and he's not liking that at all. Because, anyways, I think there's a good reason why they did it that way.
Yeah, I really like it.
Yeah.
It's a really cool sort of abstract way of getting that concept across, right?
What, bringing him down to her level.
Yeah. And so, he begins
only
spilling the beans.
His fleshy body is up high. His true self is down low.
Right.
He starts telling her all the secrets.
He says, we turned banners against the Duke. So remember, the Duke was funding Molenkamp, but now Molenkamp has turned against the Duke. Right. This was kind of what they explained in the very first scene in the VKP meeting room. We turned banners against the Duke. He sought to seal off our wellspring. After 2 decades of toil, the Duke is mortally ill. He fears he will pay for this life's sins in the next. So he seeks to bury this city, as though that would bring absolution. So the Duke is getting, he feels like he needs to absolve the sins of having continued the dark, or continued harboring, or allowing the dark power of Leomond to exist. He seemed to have inherited that, the dark, the power of the dark is some kind of inheritance. It was passed to him.
I want to know, I think we should talk about this more later.
Okay. So, anyways, the fact that he wants to now not only get rid of that, but like sort of bury the city, that's his way of feeling like he can absolve
to atone,
atone for the sins of his life, of having allowed that to continue.
Yeah.
And so she responds, and you seek to pluck the city from his dying hands, correct? And this is where Hardin, the real version of the man, is like, oh, you're a seer. What witchcraft is this? Like, you're reading my mind.
Yeah.
He tries to stop her, but she keeps going. She insists you will answer, right? I really like that. She almost commands it.
Yeah.
And then the ghost Hardin appears again, right? And he says, to inherit the city, you must have the key. Only the bearer of the key can receive the power of the Grand Grimoire. The key bearer, the Duke, will soon die. If he dies without a successor, all is lost. The Duke thinks he can cut off the cursed Molenkamp bloodline, but that must not be allowed to happen. We will assume the legacy. So, this is going back to the first, I keep saying first, the first, like, the real true first scene of the game, not the prelude scene in the VKP offices, but in the Duke's Manor when it's being burned. When we first see Sidney and Hardin, he's saying, oh, the cursed Duke, where has he put it? I think what Sidney is referring to there is the key, this key that he's talking about. Where has the Duke put the key?
Right.
Right? Like they're looking for the key that they need for this right to inherit the dark. That's what Hardin believes, is that the Duke has this key, and they could not find it in the manor. They're looking in Leomond for the key, right?
Yeah.
And this is to assume the legacy of the dark, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, Hardin then stabs his own leg to like break the tie, to make it so that she stops reading his mind or whatever, which I kind of liked.
Yeah.
And so she's like, wow, this is my power. And he says, so it seems, as I can scry on distant locales, so the talent of the Heart-Seers has followed you. So basically,
the Heart-Seer, I like that.
It's a good way of putting it, Heart-Seer, rather than like reading minds. It's a heart reading kind of thing, right? So she's developing the same power that he has. And so, anyways, this is where they started talking about what you were referencing a little earlier. Even if he can see the past and clasp the truth, this is her speaking to Hardin. So she's talking about Sidney's power to see the past and to like learn the truth about things. Even if he can see the past and clasp the truth, how are we to know if he speaks it? If he can push us to believe anything, how do we tell the truth from falsehood?
Yeah.
And he says, why single him out? Everyone lies. Surely you know that. Whether they are the dark sorcerers or corrupt clergy, they all lie, and we believe. Am I wrong? And then she heart sees him again, and he says, he wouldn't lie to me.
He wouldn't lie to me. That was what his real thought was.
And this is a key setup.
Yes.
I really like this.
Yeah.
He believes in his heart that no, Sidney wouldn't do that to me.
Yes.
And it's ignorance, and I think a lot of this to me felt very relevant to basically all times, really. But like, I only know my own time. But it seems relevant to my time. Everybody thinks they've got it right. Everybody thinks my side's not lying to me.
Well, and even if you get somebody to speak to where they're having a conversation and they're trying to sound reasonable, they will say something along the lines of, yeah, you know, everyone lies, you can't trust anyone.
Yes.
But then if were you to be able to read their hearts at the time they say that, they would be saying, oh, but these are the people who I believe would never lie to me.
Yes, right.
And it's, a contradiction, right? But
I do feel like most people, like you said, would admit, let's say like our media or something like that are lying to us all the time.
Yes.
And there's like all this evidence of that, right? But yet there are still certain pieces of information they choose to believe.
Yes.
It's like you have to trust at some point someone's not lying to you if you want to form your worldview on what's actually happening, right?
So,
but how you arrive at that is not necessarily like a logical thing.
Exactly, it's not. It's, well, I was told this and it seemed right to me, so I'm going to like hold on to it like really heavily.
Yeah.
There's something called the Gelman amnesia effect.
Yeah.
Which is where if you're an expert in something, whenever the news, talks about that thing, you will often find that they did not treat it properly, that they did not talk about it well, right? Like they're wrong, they got it wrong. But the reason it's called the Gelman amnesia effect is because once they move on to something that you're not an expert in, you believe it as though it was 100% true. Even though the one thing that you really know about they got wrong, you believe all the other things that you don't know about, assuming that they're the experts and they got it right. But everyone does that. Yeah. Everyone who then the expert in that thing says, oh, they got that wrong, though. And then the expert in the next thing that they talk about. So you could find an expert, well, many experts, that would say, oh, they got it wrong. But then they all will just believe the next thing that is told to them. That's just kind of a part of how the brain works.
I feel like the nuance and the truth that I think everyone can relate to in that concept is really beautifully
I think
shown.
I think so. And just with that one line, he wouldn't lie to me, where it's like, oh man, that is so human though. That's so
it
like
really is
tangible and real.
Hardin is a super relatable character,
yes,
particularly in this scene. But I just think throughout the game, he's a really good character. I really like him a lot. Okay, so she then asks him what they're planning to do with the Grand Grimoire, but this he won't answer, and she can't make him answer. So even when she tries to dig,
somehow he's able to.
He does not reveal that. And so they kind of move on from that. This is where Ashley says, in response to hearing all of that, the power to brand one's will onto another, Sydney's true past, was it a lie?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
So now he questioning
question that
whether what Sydney showed him was the truth or not, or what Rosencrantz confirmed was the truth or not. Now it's all muddied because it's like
Sydney lies.
I know Sydney lies now.
Yes.
So he could have been lying to me
Did
about
he lie
this
to me?
to manipulate me because he has this game that he's since the beginning of the game. When after that first Minotaur boss fight, he's like, you are, I'm the Heart, which by the way, Heart is not a rabbit, it's a deer.
Oh, really?
It got a little confused because Hare is a rabbit. Right?
Yeah, well, I just
Heart,
assumed.
I kind of did too.
Okay.
A Heart is a deer. But anyways, you're the hunter, Ashley's the hunter, I'm the Heart, you're going to chase me now. It's a game manipulation that he's putting him through.
Yeah.
So as part of that game, why would he not lie? To get me to think a certain way, or to get me to do what he wants me to do.
It's a trap. It's all they're playing. Like if you're setting traps for someone, why would your words not do the same?
Yeah.
Why would you not set a trap with your words?
Right. So now, as it seemed like maybe he was about to accept, Ashley was about to accept he had been lying to himself and believing his own lies. Now he's like, but Sydney could be lying to me, and Rosencrantz could be lying to me.
It's a reason for him to believe what he wants to believe.
Yes.
Right? He found a reason.
Yes.
And he's going to hold on to it.
So, after you fight several more bosses, you come up against Tierger and Neesa.
Oh, yeah.
They want revenge on Ashley for killing Grissom. Like, Grissom's body is there, who's now a zombie, right?
Yeah.
So you fight them, but then after that, Grissom animates. But the craziest thing about this is Grissom, when he died, his soul left. We saw that earlier with the one soldier.
Yeah.
He was like laying there and his soul left, and that was introducing us to the concept that souls stay trapped in purgation in Leomond, and then anytime they can find a body, they go after it, and that's how the undead animate. Grissom's soul found his own body.
Yeah, that's weird.
Really crazy, right? And Neesa sort of comments on this. She says, Grissom, you have left this coil. By coil, she means like mortal coil.
Yeah,
right?
The mortal coil.
You've left this coil. The dark has filled you. You have joined the cold ones. An ironic fate. I suppose it is better than endless wandering, but to happen upon your own corpse. Mm-hmm. So Grissom's soul found his own zombie body
Yeah.
and reanimated as a zombie, but like a part of his
He's still
consciousness is
semi-sentient.
sort of there, but he's losing it.
He's losing it, and he's hearing voices everywhere. He's like,
Yeah.
the walls are telling me to kill people, and
Yeah.
the walls are telling me that everyone wants to kill me.
Yep. So he's losing it. He's losing his humanity, even though
Yeah.
he's found his own body, which is a really
That's
interesting
crazy.
idea, right?
Yeah, very
Your soul finds your own corpse and animates you as a zombie, but your own soul. So that was a cool scene. Later on, we see a scene where Guildenstern, Samantha, and Rosencrantz kind of arrive at the center of the city in the, what did you call it earlier? The cathedral, the central cathedral.
Yeah.
Like where it's the center of the transmutation circle.
Can't remember what it's
right?
called, but yeah, the cathedral.
Yeah, the Grand Cathedral, I think. So Rosencrantz goes back, and the rest of them go in. So Guildenstern has arrived at like the center of the city now, and Rosencrantz is going, I think, to find Sydney. So after fighting another boss, we get another scene with Hardin, Merlose, and Joshua. They're in. I think they are now inside of the cathedral too. So they've made it into the center of the city as well. I think they're maybe just a little bit ahead of Guildenstern's retinue at this point. So they're just a little bit ahead of them.
Based on the order of events, that sounds correct.
So they're inside of a room that has the Kildaean Rood. That's
top.
this symbol. It's on the ceiling.
Yeah.
And Joshua still isn't talking, right? But Hardin seems to be really trying hard to actually care for him. Like, are you hungry, boy? Like, he's like being attentive to him. And Merlose begins to read Hardin's heart again. And he reveals a little bit about his past and some of why he seems to probably be doing this, why he's so concerned about Joshua, right?
Yeah.
So he says, it was during my days in the Peace Guard. There was an investigation into an incident. I was part of a special team entrusted with delivering blades to rebels in neighboring kingdoms. Apparently, some did not reach their destination. So he was supposed to be selling weapons to neighboring kingdoms for their civil wars.
Yeah.
This is something Rosencrantz touched on a little bit.
Yep.
Okay, so he was part of a group doing that. So some of these weapons did not reach their destination, right? They claimed some of us were making coppers selling the steel on the black market. And then he goes, we were all guilty. I was not the only one. So he's kind of like justifying himself a little,
He's like,
bit here.
I definitely did that.
So he did sell weapons that were bought by neighboring kingdoms. He took some of those stores and sold them on the black market,
For
and
his
they
own.
caught him doing this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's see. They presented me with an offer, betray my friends, and I would walk free. I had a brother, half my age. He was gravely ill, and we knew not when he would leave us. I wanted money. I wanted my freedom. I sold my friend, my brother. That was a little confusing to me. I don't think he's saying his brother. He's saying his friend was like a brother to him. I sold my friend, my brother.
I should have checked the Japanese on that one, because I had that same thought where I was like, that's a strange line, which I have not had much this whole game.
Yes, right.
Not often does this happen, but this was one of the moments where I was like, I should have looked in the Japanese.
I think this is brother more in the sense of comrade, close comrade.
Because he does,
Not
there is
not familiar.
an actual brother involved here, right?
Yes.
So that's partly why it seems so confusing.
Yeah. So I sold my friend, but they did not set me free. When I escaped from prison, my brother was dead. And so she then says in response to that, so you joined Mullenkamp to revenge this injustice done to you? The real version of Hardin, you scry too deep, woman.
Yeah, because she's speaking out loud, right?
Yes.
So he may not know exactly what she's been told, but he does know
She's
that she's talking to him again.
in there somewhere,
Yeah.
learning about his past. And so she says, this thing you do will not bring your brother back. He says, silence, what do you know? And she says, do not play the child, do not blame your weakness on another. So she's really calling him out here, which deservedly so. I mean,
yes. It's funny that she's in a position to do that, though.
Yeah.
To call him out, that she feels as though she's in a position to do that.
so he calls her a witch, and he's about to strike her, but then he gets shot from across the room by one of Guildenstern's soldiers.
Yep.
And Guildenstern kind of comes up one of those levitating blocks at that time into the room. So it's like Guildenstern has caught up with them now. So he's just got like a bolt like piercing his side right here, and he's kind of like collapsed, right? But he's not dead. And I love this because this is another example of the wordplay we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Hardin says, quicker than a damned bloodhound. And Guildenstern responds, "Our dark hounds know your stench, cultist." So it's an idea, again, that like an analogy or a metaphor or a simile that he uses, and then he uses the same, Guildenstern responds with the same simile, but sort of like takes it in another direction. Pat Holloman in the comments basically wrote a comment talking about how this concept is called a conceit in like traditional poetry, right?
Sure.
It's a literary device. A conceit uses an extended metaphor that compares two very dissimilar things. A conceit is often elaborate and controls a large section of a poem or the entire poem. Conceits are often quite unique and ingenious and can prevent striking juxtaposition and comparison of unlike things. So in this case, he's not actually a bloodhound, but he's like a bloodhound,
right?
Right? So like that's what a conceit is. So this was actually really common. I talked about in Shakespeare, but in all poetry at the time, were these extended conceits where one person would bring up some metaphor and the other person would take that and run with it, and they would kind of go back and forth like that.
Well, that's a way to show wit or to be, to be smart about your dialogue.
Yeah.
And just to show your intelligence just in general is how quick are you on your feet to be able to take your opponent's metaphor and use it against them.
Right.
Like right away. Like that takes some pretty fluid brainwaves there.
Yeah. It's really cool. And I mean, obviously it's not nearly as extensive here as in Shakespeare or something. And Alexander O. Smith actually talks about that in the interview. He's like, well, our wordplay isn't nearly as extensive as Shakespeare.
Right, it's
really
just one back and forth, because you can go back and forth several times. You can have a volley on the same metaphor with wordplay, and then whoever wins the volley has the upper hand intellectually, right?
Yeah, right.
And like that, but that's hard. That's very difficult to do.
Yeah, and sometimes maybe the entire poem would be made of just people playing off this one conceit, right? Back and forth.
Yeah, totally.
But I really like it. Quicker than damned bloodhound.
Yeah.
Our dark hounds know your stench, cultist.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so then you have to fight 2 more bosses before you see the rest of this scene.
That's great.
It breaks away from this scene. You go fight 2 more bosses, and then we come back to Hardin and Guildenstern facing off. Just crazy. So Guildenstern is demanding to know where the key is, right? That Hardin's been talking about that they need, right? That they're searching the city for. He tries to use his power of the dark to compel Hardin. Hardin really doesn't know the answer, though, so he can't tell him. He's like, I don't know.
Sidney's purposefully kept him in the dark, which is smart.
But Hardin's also confused by this power that Guildenstern is using, because he says he says that you're not drawing from the wellspring or something like that.
Yeah.
Guildenstern is not drawing from the city's wellspring. How can you use this magic? I don't get it.
And he says there's other methods to the magic.
He says, you think the dark flows only within your city, you underestimate the cardinal.
Right, so he implicates that the church is the darkness as well.
This is classic JRPG. The church is always evil.
Exactly.
But this was cool too. So Guildenstern creates a vision where Sidney appears, but it's a trick because Hardin believes Sidney is like interfering with this. He believes Sidney is showing him this and talking to him, and that Sidney interfered with them, but it's really Guildenstern creating it to trick Hardin into telling him more.
Right.
Which was a really nice sort of creative way of using his magic, right?
Yes.
So, but Sidney approaches Hardin there. And Hardin begins unwittingly to reveal about what he knows about what's called the blood sin, right?
Yeah.
So he says the blood sin is basically what the key is called. Only he who holds the blood sin can succeed to the dark city. The would-be successor must cede his phantom soul if he is to accept his prize, control of the dark. These streets already teem with souls. All that is needed is the key. We have no time, the key, show it to me. So he's trying to get Sidney to show him where the key is or what the key is. He doesn't know what the key is, but he does know it's called the blood sin.
Yeah.
And he does know that a phantom, what does he say? A phantom soul has to be...
basically, someone has to be sacrificed.
Sacrificed.
Yeah, in order for the thing to work, for the key to work. That the keyhole is sacrifice.
Yes,
and then
keyhole is sacrifice, and the key is the blood sin. And then that opens the door to the dark.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy, I like that. And then This is where Guildenstern, like Sydney, kind of like a smile comes up, and then it just turns back into Guildenstern again.
Yeah, and Hardin's upset. Something tells me though that Hardin was compelled not just by the imagery, but that Hardin wasn't in control. That Hardin was kind of, his heart was speaking.
Yes.
For his mind in that moment,
right.
Because the way that it's presented, it should have, or maybe I say it could have been obvious that was Guildenstern and not Sydney, right, who he was talking to, because it was right then in that moment, and it just happened, and Sydney's like, so, about the key thing.
Oh, yeah, and then he also...
Remind me, what is the key?
Is this a test, yes, Sydney? He's like, yes, it's a test. Tell me what
Hardin
you know.
falls into it,
he falls for it.
So immediately,
yeah, right.
that I feel like there's... I feel like Guildenstern is doing more than just evoking this dream. I feel like Sydney is also, that Guildenstern is also doing a little bit of heart reading as well, and conversing with, the pure, cannot tell a lie version of Hardin.
Yep.
And that Hardin feels like he was taken advantage of with that magic.
Yep. And this is where Guildenstern puts together what the key is, because he hears that term, blood sin, right?
Yeah.
He's like, the blood sin, you say? It has a familiar ring to it. And then he looks up and sees the Chaldean root on the ceiling.
Yeah.
And he says, years past, during the Inquisition of the heretics, the rude inverse was carved on them, an abjuration of the flesh. Those who bore this tattoo called it the blood sin. Good God, Sydney held the key all along, the tattoo on his back. It is the blood sin. He has the key. So this is when he puts it together. That symbol, this symbol right here, the inverse of that, during the Inquisitions, they would tattoo the inverse onto heretics, right? And so they called that symbol, the reverse symbol, the blood sin.
Yeah.
And that is the key to the Dark of Leomond, is the tattoo that he's got on his back. He puts it all together here, which is super cool. It's like it's been hiding in plain sight the whole time.
Yes, it's been in plain sight.
Yeah.
I wonder why Sydney chose to have his back open all the time.
Yes.
So that everyone could see that, so that this could be figured out.
Maybe it's so that it's like a 4D chess thing. It's like no one will expect that I would hide the key right in front of their faces.
And that's probably true. The real reason is because of the game.
Because it looks cool.
Because it makes an interesting story, and it looks cool and all that. But I do wonder, from a practical standpoint, why Sydney wears such revealing clothing. Like his pants are all the way down.
It's way down. He's a low-waisted low-waisted pair of trousers there.
Yes, exactly.
I really like his design, though. Like his metal arms and claws.
Oh, dude, it reminds me of the design of Kadaj in Advent Children.
Yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah.
He's got sort of that, what would you call it?
He's real thin.
Ambiguous gender kind
of
look to him a little bit. Similar to like Kadaj. There's a word for
androgynous?
That. Androgynous, yeah. A little bit of an androgynous kind of feel about him.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he presents very feminine and masculine attributes, very much so.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating.
He's cool. I really like. He's probably my favorite character in the game.
Oh, me too.
Sydney's a great character.
Didn't start out that way.
But it really became that way in the scene where he reveals Sydney's past, and then in the scene where Rosencrantz says, all of these groups want the power of the dark, and it was like, oh, Sydney's trying to stop these people from getting it. He's the real protagonist of the story. He's not trying to use the darkness for evil. He's trying to stop everyone from getting it, including his own cultist Molenkamp people.
Including his own people.
Including Hardin. He's like trying to keep it from everybody.
Yeah.
Now, he's been lying to them this whole time about the key and all this thing. He's trying to keep the power of the dark out of the hands of everybody, which is really, really cool, the way that that's all revealed.
Yep.
And I also love the animation on the faces that they do in this game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's limited animation. It's basically replacing a JPEG texture on the face.
So it's just like a moment.
Yes.
But it's good.
It's still really great, because when Guildenstern realizes this, right, the camera's a little high, he kind of tilts his head up and just goes, his eyes just open. It's like, oh my gosh, he's had it the whole time. Yeah. And his face just like really sells the shock of that moment, or like the revelation of it, right?
Yeah.
This is the sort of thing you did not see during this era, the PlayStation era, like facial animation to like punctuate like a moment like that. And even on the N64, I can't remember any game playing on the N64 that had like facial animation like this. Like I remember the Zelda games, maybe their eyes would open a little bit.
Yeah.
But like for the most part, you just didn't see this.
No, and they used the same method, which was just replace the texture and then, in a moment.
Yeah.
But
which is kind of what we did on our
Star
Star
Wars Mario
video.
Kart. Yeah, that's exactly what we did.
We kind of just used a different texture on the faces.
So whenever they had to blink, we had a half eye closed frame,
yeah.
like a texture, and then we'd swap that out for the full eye close, and then put it back up and then up, and then that was a blink, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a 2-frame animation.
Yeah, super quick, but that's how they did it back then, and I guess that's still how they do it now.
Yeah. Well, I guess
for farther away camera movements. If the camera's really close,
they have facial capture now, right?
Well, that's true, but I'm talking about Mario.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure
With Mario, no.
It's still just a texture.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about like Hellblade, okay, they actually got the 3D there.
Right. Okay, so Guildenstern says to Hardin, he has played you false. And Hardin says, no, I won't. And then Guildenstern says, then why does Sidney not take the city? The Duke is in his final hours. Like he's basically putting it together. Yeah. Like the reason he hasn't used the key
we've been
is
running
because
in
he doesn't want to use the key.
Yeah.
And he's been leading his own Mullenkamp followers on this sort of endless chase for the key that he never intended to find, right? Because he's trying to stop it. He's had the key the whole time and he has not entered. So clearly he's just trying to prevent everyone from getting it. And surely he would not follow the Duke's wishes, says Hardin. He's realizing the Duke and Sidney are actually
doing the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah, which is crazy because Mullenkamp, are they the ones that torched the Duke's Manor, or was that the church?
No, the Mullenkamp did.
So that's crazy, right?
Yes.
So it's like, do they like each other or not? And Sidney was there. Sidney was like part of that.
Right.
So yeah, this part is a little bit confusing, but I think gets cleared up at the very end.
But basically, Mullenkamp was pissed that the Duke decided to bury the city and to get rid of the power of the dark, to close the wellspring.
Yeah.
They're like, we've been toiling here and working for this for 2 decades. How can you just take this wellspring from us? Sidney, realizing that sentiment rising up, pretended to side with them against the Duke when really he was with the Duke all along.
I have a couple parallels here, but that I will reveal mostly at the very end of the game. But one of them can be talked about now, which is the idea that that the church, the people that attend the church, are good people, but the top of the church is corrupt.
Yes.
Mullenkamp
is the other way.
Opposite. There's these torturous, rebellious, bloodthirsty people who are just fighting, the cultists. Yeah. And they're being led about by this wholesome, good-hearted person who's just trying to keep the evil out of their hands. Yep. I love it. I actually think that's really good. Yeah. That plays to what I mentioned before, the duality of the themes. Well, the duality of the universe, where it's like, the good and evil are constantly in fighting each other. And at this level, you see it manifest in both levels, right? Both at the people and at the top levels. And that it's just not what you think it would be, but that things seem to be the upside down inverse of each other, right? Which plays on the idea of the inverse root, right?
Yes.
Where it's like you just can have it both ways. Well, the game presents it in both ways, but you've got to really see it, and then you'll know. There's a really cool example of this in the end, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but
it calls
really
back
cool example.
A little bit to the conversation that Sidney had with Guildenstern in the last episode we talked about, I think. Or maybe, was it 2, or I think it was the last one. Yeah. Where he was calling him basically, he was talking about the church and how they manipulate people and things like that. And they were using the analogy of shepherds and things like that. Right. But he's a shepherd.
He says your church is the one that leads people around. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And he's trying to do the opposite, but his followers are... What they want is not, so he's
They need to do a switch, right? The heads of the church need to lead Mullenkamp, and then the heads of Mullenkamp need to lead the church.
To be paired correctly.
And then you would have, a perfect world. But somehow I feel like the game is implying that that's not possible.
Yeah, right. Okay. So Guildenstern then stabs Hardin, and Joshua sort of cries out for the first time.
Yeah.
He's out loud, no, kind of a thing, right? First time since he's been kidnapped. Right on the back of this, juxtaposed.
I needed some explaining on this one.
Yes.
I need help.
I think we're going to finish this.
Okay.
Because we're almost to the end. Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close.
I think we're going to finish this today. So I have no problems now with spoilers.
Then, all right.
So we're just gonna do this because I really want to talk about how cool this is.
Okay.
Right on the back of Joshua crying out, right? We see a scene where a boy who looks like Joshua is in the Duke's Manor.
The Duke's Manor, because you can see the woman's statue you saw at the very beginning of the game.
Right. And then the Duke opens the door and the boy runs into his arms.
Yes. So that's the father-son.
On the back of that, it shows Sydney.
Yes.
And so I believe this is the subtle way, not the later very explicit way, in which they reveal that Sydney is the son of Duke Bardorba.
This is where I got that question.
Yes.
But then I started wondering who Josh is. Well, who's the actual son? Because based on that family portrait,
yes,
the Duke has one kid.
The idea here is that Joshua and Sydney look very, very similar.
And I can get that. I get that.
And so the boy in the portrait is Sydney, at the time when Sydney was the only child.
Sure.
Later in life, Duke Bardorba had a second son, Joshua.
Who is not depicted, and he
in
never
in
got...
that portrait.
Yeah, okay.
Because that portrait was drawn years and years in the past.
Okay, fair
enough. But Sydney looks like Joshua, or when he was a boy, he looked like Joshua, and they gave him the same haircut.
Right.
And he dressed similarly. And maybe it's even hand-me-down clothes. I don't know. Maybe they were originally Sydney's clothes.
I feel like it would, because I feel like Joshua is wearing those same clothes.
They
he
are
has
the same.
Jewel thing on his like necklace.
So that is the way that they sort of withheld that particular
I thought that.
twist of the story.
I thought that. So that was a memory?
That particular
that was an old memory?
scene of him running into his arms, that was Sydney as a boy running into the Duke's arms.
And that was a memory that Sydney had.
Yes.
That was a thing that actually happened in the past. That's not a figurative analogy.
That's the way I read it.
Okay.
Yes.
Because at first I was like, oh my gosh, did the Duke die? Like, because it's this, the camera goes up and you see the light and the Duke is there and he's all happy and it just seems dreamy and almost like the Duke had died. That's what I wrote here. I was like, I feel like I should get it, but I don't. It seems like the Duke died. Is that what I'm supposed to get from this? But clearly, as the game goes on, that's not the case.
Yeah.
And I did think that the kid was going to be Sydney, but then I'm like, but then who's Joshua?
Yeah.
It just, I had trouble.
Joshua
making that
is
connection.
the youngest son. I would guess he has two sons. I kind of let this slip in our first episode. I didn't mean to say it.
Oh, yeah.
So I tried to correct myself. I said, Joshua's the youngest son of Duke Bardorba, and I was like, I'll fetch. Or as far as we know, the only son of Duke Bardorba.
That maybe subtly was the reason why I actually did think of Sydney when I saw this scene.
Yeah.
But Joshua, I did do some reading after playing the game about what exactly this means. Not that I was looking for this scene. No one ever explained this scene to me.
Yeah.
But I did come to understand a little bit more about Joshua and Sydney, and at least in part, where the tension was between the Duke and Sydney was that Sydney felt like he should be able to use Joshua to continue or to transfer the blood sin to him.
Oh, sure.
Right? And the Duke didn't want that because the Duke felt very pristine about his youngest son.
Yeah.
Or maybe the kid was too young.
Or he's trying to
like
absolve his sins of keeping this thing going anyways.
Right. So he wants it to just all end.
Get out of his bloodline.
But Sydney seems to know that this can't end. Somehow it will fall into the wrong hands.
Yes.
We need to keep it going, but we need to make sure who it gets passed on to instead of just letting it be found by somebody.
Pass it to a new bloodline and to someone who won't misuse it.
Yes, to somebody who doesn't want it.
Yes.
Right? So if they want it, all that disqualified right then and there.
Right.
But the Duke seemed to have different ideas on that. That's my understanding of this.
Yeah.
That there was a little bit of tension, and that's why Sydney literally had to kidnap his brother.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's correct. And it's also why the Duke, in that first scene where we see him like ill in bed, he's questioning what Sidney is doing. He's like,
yes,
that
exactly,
fool used his wyvern and like all these
what's
things.
he doing?
So
what's he doing?
They are on the same side, but Bardorba just doesn't understand what Sidney is up to or whether he's still with him, because the way he's acting seems opposed. But the reason Sidney is doing that is so that his Molenkamp people will believe, right?
Yes.
Believe that he's actually opposed when he's not.
Right.
So he tricked even the Duke, his actions.
Yes.
So he's playing everybody.
Because the Duke is who sent Rosencrantz to go check things out.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyways, that's crazy. This scene is interesting.
Yes.
And I did sort of make that connection, but I kept thinking, no, that can't be it. That can't be it.
So when we come back to Sidney, now the present day Sidney, right? He sort of he's somewhere else, but he realizes Hardin has been stabbed.
Yep, he can feel it.
He's like Hardin, so he feels badly. This is why I said earlier in an earlier episode that despite the fact that Sidney is manipulating Hardin and using him a little bit, he does actually care about Hardin. He's not just using him as a tool, or he doesn't view him that way. He views him as a friend. He really means that when he says, we're friends, you and I, right? But anyways, this scene where he's alone and he's concerned shows that he actually does care about Hardin. Right. So I like that.
But there is a priority here.
Yes.
Which is the blood sin could destroy the whole world.
Yes.
Like, I have friends and that's nice, but I can't let this fall into someone else's hands. Therefore, I'll do what it takes. I'll lie to my friends. I'll make sure that I can protect this thing, which is more important, right?
Right. So then Rosencrantz enters the room to confront Sidney. This is a really great scene. This scene is super awesome. Rosencrantz asks Sidney what his plan is for Ashley. Like, what is it that you're planning to do with him, right? Sidney has chosen Ashley. This is where he reveals he's chosen Ashley to be the successor of the power of the dark.
Yeah, which Rosencrantz suspected.
Yeah, so he says, Sidney says, I've given up. There's no meaning in an incomplete death. I think this calls back to, which we won't get into now, but some of the philosophy that we've talked about in games like Lost Odyssey before, about eternal life, and how eventually it starts to feel like life is meaningless when you live forever, kind of thing. I think he's feeling some of that here. He doesn't want to be immortal anymore. He's sick of it.
It's almost like either way, you would need there to be some heavenly ultimate destination. Either way, whether you're immortal or not.
Yes.
So if you're immortal forever, then you're just prolonging this nothing existence that is meaningless, unless there's a meaning. And then if you die, well, you need meaning for that too. So either way, it's like you need meaning. And it seems like Rosencrantz doesn't really believe in the general meaning of what the religious aspects of the way that this world works. And so he's kind of like, all there is power. I just want the power. Right. That's the point. The point here is power. So that's what I want.
Yeah. So he says, what are you ranting about? And Sidney says, you don't understand. He is the perfect one to rule this city of darkness. He shows all the signs. He is ready. And Rosencrantz says, that weak-spirited vagrant? He has the unquestioning faith of a child in his morality.
Exactly.
And that's the point, right? So Sidney says,
Rosencrantz didn't get that.
Better a pious child than an iniquitous rogue. Unlike you, he would not misuse the dark. So, yeah, Rosencrantz.
So that's Sidney's ultimate idea here, is to not misuse the dark.
Yeah, and he needs to choose somebody who he knows won't do that. Rosencrantz clearly is not that person.
Clearly.
So Rosencrantz punches him in the face and knocks him to the floor. And I love Sidney's response to that. Why try to harry me when it is he who shamed you?
I know. He's like, he showed you up. He's the better vessel, not you. So what did I do?
Yeah. Nonetheless, you could not harm me.
Yep.
Sidney tries to use his power, right? But then Rosencrantz is immune to that. Your powers hold no sway over me. Prepare yourself, Sidney.
See, and that's crazy. I just don't get how Rosencrantz...
I think it's just an emergent power of the city of Leomond. He's just got one aspect of it that makes him immune to that particular
thing. So he just...
He just can resist that part of the power.
That's interesting.
And I would assume that that's an emergent power, just like everyone else is getting emergent powers from being in the city.
Right.
He just happened to get that one.
I find it interesting that a power. Well, I guess that kind of does. No, that can kind of make sense, right? Like a power of the darkness is the darkness defending against its own darkness.
Sure.
Right.
To resist its own power.
I can get that through like some Final Fantasy things where you'll have a shield that is magic and it's a shield. It's using magic and it's a shield, but it protects you from the other magic. Like I can kind of get that, so it's possible. It seems a little off to me, but.
Then Ashley basically arrives, and Rosencrantz like hides behind the door.
Yeah.
And he smacks him as soon as he walks in, and he's kind of.
And I love how he's like, see how dumb he is.
Yeah.
He just walked into a room and let me hit him. Like, you're so dumb, Sydney.
It's another Scrub quote, I feel, because it's like he sucker punched him, and it's like, see, I'm stronger than him.
Exactly.
But before, when they actually fought face to face, man to man, like in a fair contest, he got owned by Ashley. So
clearly,
it's totally a Scrub quote thing to do. But
it is, and especially the way Rosencrantz ends up going out is just great.
I love it.
It's so good.
This is your successor? Open your eyes, Sydney. I am the one. Hardin is gone. Old man Bardorba's next. And Sydney, your time will soon come, I think. You'd give the city to the Cardinal's motley rabble? I think not. Not after the hardships I've endured. I'm sure you agree, Sydney. It is time. I will carry on the legacy in your name. Now the rights. Name me your successor. And Sydney says, I name you Worm, as you crawl through the dust.
That's so good.
It's so hardcore. It's an awesome response.
I name you ... Worm. So perfect.
Beastly. Then Rosencrantz cuts off his arm in response to that. And he says, then keep your immortality. Here, let me lighten your burden. Ah, ha, ha, ha. And he's laughing. And then Sydney just stands up and picks up the arm and just reattaches it. And this is like really disturbing to Rosencrantz.
There's no blood.
Like, what the fetch?
Yes.
and Sydney says, I gave my limbs to the gods. Perhaps I'll add yours to the offering. And this is where he starts to kind of gain the upper hand.
Well, you can tell because Rosencrantz's laugh turns into a nervous laughter.
Yeah.
It becomes a ha, wait, what? Right, he's super confused at what's going on.
What is going on here? So he says, when will you learn that your power is useless against me, right? He's kind of boasting about that.
Yeah.
And then he looks down to his sword arm and sees that he's holding the arm of Sydney in his hand, and it scares him, and he kind of drops it, but he drops his sword. So
he throws
it's
it.
It's an illusion.
Yeah.
So obviously not all of the powers of the dark can be
It
repelled.
Seems like he can't be attacked directly.
Or mentally controlled or something.
Sure.
Yeah.
But you can play with his perceptions, right?
Yes.
You can play with the things around him.
Yes.
And that's how Sydney gains the upper hand.
Yep. And then they kind of start circling each other a little bit. I really love these shots. All these shots are really cool. And like Sydney is like, he's got that like chin down, eyes up look, like that really sinister look as he's like, talking to him. Let's see. Do not forget where you're standing, Rosencrantz. And he's like, you deceived me. I've done nothing so base. You deceived yourself with a boy's daydreams. Fear not, sweet Rosencrantz. I will not kill you. And then Rosencrantz kind of backs into a statue that comes to life and then just like cuts him down right there.
The coolest statue, by the way. It's so funny. I spent a while taking notes on the statue.
Nice.
Because I didn't realize we were going to fight it. Because I was like, oh, there's a statue here. Oh my gosh, it's got 4 arms and 2 faces, and one side's dark and the other side's light. And there's really cool symbolism here. This is awesome. And then it becomes, comes alive. And I thought that was great.
And it's a boss that you end up fighting.
Yes, and you end up getting a very good look. Very good look at her.
Yeah.
But once again, the duality, the left, right, two faces, but one body, right?
Yep.
4 arms. So you see the 2 and 1, right? There's 2, there's 1, but there are 2 aspects of the 1.
Yes. And so as Sydney leaves the room, as he's going to allow you to battle against this, monster,
Yep.
he says, I give you the city Riskbreaker, all its power, all to you. Make haste, join me. Already your powers are close to readiness. Come. And Asher's like, keep your accursed city. Where's Merlose?
I know, he's just trying to save her.
Where's Merlose?
At this point,
I don't care about any of this.
Yeah, at this point, he's just trying to save her. He's not trying to do anything special, anything else.
Yeah, which is why he's ideal as the successor.
Exactly.
Right?
Because he just wants to help people.
And so Sidney says, you may be able to save them, your wife and child. Should you meet them again, repent, Ashley, repent. This is a really interesting line.
Yes.
And again, there's so much to debate about like what the actual truth of Ashley's past is, because he could be, it seems like he's contradicting himself here, but he could be lying now just to get him to keep chasing him.
Which is what he's been doing.
He's just like keeping the hunter heart chase going. It's so hard to tell what he's saying, whether what's true, what's not. Because he's manipulating everyone.
Up until the point that the event happens, I wouldn't really trust anything he says.
Yeah.
And I say that understanding that he is the protagonist of the story.
Yeah, exactly. So after you kill that boss, Ashley then arrives at the cathedral. And so this is basically where the final dungeon it is. And it's very, 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 very long. You fight a metric F ton of bosses.
Yes, a lot.
It's so many. There's like so many puzzles in this place. It's a really long final dungeon. But as you're going through there, eventually Ashley hears Merlose kind of calling to him again for help, right? Yeah. And he kind of pieces together, oh, she's up above me. She's on a higher floor. I need to go up. Then we see Sidney approaching Guildenstern for like their final sort of like face-off, right? So Guildenstern has Merlose and Joshua and a mortally wounded Hardin kind of there on the floor. He's got them. And so Sidney kind of comes in at this point. And great dialogue back and forth here between him and Guildenstern, but also Hardin realizing that he's been lied to the whole time and Sidney revealing that.
Yeah.
It's all in the scene and it's really good.
Yep.
So that's the first thing Guildenstern does. Like basically tell your pawn here about like the fact you've been lying to him,
exactly.
Right?
Go tell him why you lied.
Yep. And so Sidney, or Hardin's like, please tell me it's not true.
Is it true? Yeah.
And Sidney asks for his forgiveness, right? And that's when Hardin's like, oh no, he was lying.
Now, I was surprised Hardin was still alive for this scene. So
yeah. He was stabbed in the chest and he's got a bolt wound in his side.
He got crossbowed.
But somehow he's still alive.
Oh, and he's not just alive, as we'll see later. He is very physically capable still.
Yeah, somehow.
Very much so.
He stabbed his own leg, and he was limping in that scene.
Yes, that's right.
Then he got shot with a bolt, and then he got stabbed. Now, I mean, we can kind of write this off as this is Leamond.
Magic.
There's magic here. Maybe something's keeping him alive.
What's the Chinatown line? What did they say? It's Leamond, forget about it. It's Leamond, right?
Yeah.
This is like what happens in Leamond stays in Leamond.
Yeah. And as soon as he leaves the city is when he succumbs, he dies.
Yeah,
right?
That's actually a fair point.
So maybe it's something to do with being in the city is keeping him alive. That's kind of the way I see that. So Sidney turns to Guildenstern. He says, you really want to become a martyr for your full religion? And he says, not religion, Sidney, revolution. A fresh wind to blow away the disease of the land. For our realm is sick. It suppurates with profiteers.
Suppurate.
Fawning merchants licking the boots of the nobility. They do nothing and blame others for their failure. They steal men's dreams and twist them to nightmares. We must cleanse this corruption. There must be strong, unwavering justice, and there must be fear to enforce that justice. So Guildenstern is fighting for something seemingly noble, but he wants to take the kind of totalitarian
Exactly, he wants to
become
a dictator and force.
He wants to make it happen.
Yep, his worldview,
Yep. So Sidney says, it's a wretched rule that does not value human life. And Guildenstern says in response to that, the world does not want a savior. These wretches leading lives of misery do not need salvation. The rotting branch must be pruned. And I love Sidney's response here. A tyrant always dies alone, Guildenstern. Surrounded by silver-tongued leeches, he is utterly alone. He sows sorrow and reaps death. Great response.
That is so true.
I love especially that line, surrounded by silver-tongued leeches. They'll tell you everything you want to hear, but you're actually alone. You don't have any genuine relationship with anyone.
I heard that description of Joseph Stalin recently, that he basically, everyone around him lied to him.
Yeah.
And he rose the ranks, he got to the top of power, but his reward for being at that place was that everyone always lied to him all the time about everything.
That's exactly what happened.
And that was his life. He had no friends.
Dictators, that's what's happening.
Yep, and then you just kill people, and that's your whole job, is just killing lots of people.
And you end up utterly alone.
Yep. Is it Stalin or Mao Zedong, or possibly both, that were likely poisoned by their wife? I feel like Mao Zedong may have been poisoned by his wife, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know
crazy.
the answer, but like, that's the kind of thing that happens to you when you do this.
But exactly. I mean...
Delita in Final Fantasy Tactics gets stabbed by his own wife.
I know, because she's like, all you do is kill people. You're a bad person.
Yes. If you choose the tyrant's path, that's what happens. Yeah. And then, so Guildenstern's response, I also like, this farce is over. I will have my answer. And Sidney says, "What? And if I say no?" Guildenstern, I will hew my retribution from your flesh like your pawn here. Great. I just love the dialogue, dude. The language is so cool.
You get a mental image of what is going to happen based on that, but you don't. I didn't know how to take it right then, because I was like, no, he's not really going to just like cut his skin off and wear his skin. Like, that's crazy, right? That's freaking insane.
Nope, that's exactly what he's
going to do. That's exactly what he did. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so hard. Like, that's hardcore, but like, that's so serious. That is so crazy.
Yeah.
But I didn't. My thoughts went there at first, but I was like, no, he'll do a thing. There's going to be like a thing that he does.
Yeah.
But then you also see Sidney with like the skin missing from his back.
He literally cuts, he flays the tattoo off of his back and puts it on his own back.
That's so bad.
It's so crazy, dude.
Oh my gosh.
Merlose cuts in here. If the soul is not true and fast, the rites are meaningless. It will lead to disaster. And then we hear Samantha, who I didn't realize was even in the scene here. She then kind of cuts in. She's like, Sidney! And Sidney uses her in that moment as a distraction, kind of like throws her against the wall with magic, right?
Because Guildenstern would then go to her.
Yeah, and so he turns around really quickly to try to transport Hardin and Merlose and Joshua to safety, right? But Hardin kind of stops him for a second. Wait, you sought the help of the Duke, your father? This is where he explicitly ties Sidney to being the Duke's son. And he doesn't respond, he just warps him away, right? So yes, he had been helping and sought the help of his father. They were working together all along. And then he kind of warps him somewhere safe, right? So then Guildenstern stabs Sidney and then flays the blood sin from his back. He says, perhaps I cannot kill you, immortal, but I shall have your blood sin as my trophy.
So bad.
Hardcore, dude.
My gosh. And then when you see him later on with
just a pool of blood beneath him.
Yes. Oh, man.
So after fighting another boss, Ashley finally makes it to the top floor where Sidney is lying in a pool of his own blood.
Yep. Surrounded by all the candles and then the rood.
Yeah, is on the floor.
Which, by the way, rood means crucifix.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't mention this in episode 1.
I didn't
But the
know that.
word rood means cross.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it is from ancient Latin.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So Ashley sort of like tenderly approaches him, maybe like holding his head a little bit as he's lying there with a flayed back and blood
Sidney's
all over
like,
the place.
You're a minute too late.
Yeah.
You just missed it.
So Sidney reveals that he teleported Merlose to safety because that's all Ashley cares about.
Right.
Like, where's Merlose? Where's Merlose?
She's
Just
safe.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
She's safe now.
All right.
And then Ashley sees the ghost of the boy that Merlose was seeing earlier.
Yeah.
Now, this is where it becomes known that this is the inner thoughts of Sidney.
Yes, but I kind of like that they did it.
Yes.
Because it's a good way to do it.
Yes.
I think it's a very creative, very cool way to do it.
Yes.
But I don't like that they did it.
Yes.
But I like how they did it. Because everyone else speaks from their normal self. Like, why does Sidney?
Oh, why doesn't his inner
child?
thoughts represented by the adult Sidney?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I see what you mean.
Now, I do like how they did it in the sense that it's very creative and it was very cool and it does get you the idea of who he is. But I don't like that they did it at all, because unless they had done something like that previously with other characters as well. It just didn't feel right for everyone to be their current self, but for Sydney to be a child.
I think I like it, not only because it's used in this sort of, I think, brilliant way in which they hide the identity of Sydney as Bardorba's son. But they reveal it in a really cool way that I like. But also that, like, I think each individual can be represented differently in their inner thoughts. So Sydney is more a child at heart in a sense, right? Like he's doing this because of his love of his father. Everything is driven because the boy who loved his father and the father who wasn't really a good father to him. And he wants his approval. Ultimately, that's like at the heart of Sydney's character. So there's an aspect of his inner self that I think is really well represented as a boy because that's what his motivation is.
I agree.
Whereas Hardin, you know, does not necessarily have that same thing. He's sort of tortured by what he did as a man, right?
Sure. And that's more or less true of Ashley as well.
Yeah, so their inner selves are displayed or represented differently in ways that I think make sense.
Okay.
So anyways, he's seeing the boy version of Sydney, and that's he's that seer power. And this shows that Merlose was also seeing Sydney's inner child when she saw him earlier, saying he intends to die.
Yes, which I made that connection too, but he says he intends to die.
Yeah, that's.
But no,
I agree.
No, Japanese though. In the Japanese, the subject would have likely been omitted.
Yeah,
right?
because it can
so
be
he would
ambiguous.
have said death is intended. The intent is death. Is likely. I don't know. But typically in Japanese, they don't say kare wa kare. They don't say who, like he. Kare means he. I doubt that they said the word he in that sentence.
That's a good point.
Because in Japanese, you would infer that. You don't need it. But then when you translate a game like that to English, you get this weird situation where it's like, oh, but he said he shouldn't have said it that way.
Right.
But English is a different language. And in the Japanese, you likely would have gotten that just fine. There wouldn't be an issue.
That's a really interesting point.
I didn't think of that until just now.
The language itself could be used to still obscure who the boy is and who he's referring to.
Who intends to die? Well, obviously in playing the game, it's like, oh, Ashley intends to die. Or Sydney intends to die. Okay, we'll keep playing, right? And then it's actually a cool moment where it's like, no, he was referring to himself. He's going to die. Well, it is Sydney, but it's him. It's him.
That's
but
cool.
It's not as cool of a moment in the English. But I don't see how you could do it any other way. Because it would have given it away if he said, I intend to die.
Yeah.
So I actually don't fault the way the English translation is there. It's just that's how the two languages work.
It's just how they differ. Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I actually really like that. Okay. So Sydney is sort of realizing this, right? Sorry. What the boy version of Sydney says is, I wanted to help father. This city was his only hope. And so Sydney is realizing Ashley is seeing his inner self. He's like, oh, you can see, right?
Yeah.
And so the boy says again, I wanted to help father as he helped me when I was born. I don't know what he means by
when
that.
I was like he was my dad.
Yeah, but I wonder.
I feel like there's something else.
Yeah, that they didn't. Share there.
What are the odds that Sydney? It doesn't make sense. Was Sydney adopted?
Or like a bastard or something?
Or or illegitimate. That would be something.
I don't know. They don't get into
this.
That.
Does seem to be implying something
like that.
Unusual, like not just, oh, he's my dad, I'm so glad. Because you would say, oh, I'm grateful to my mother for being born. Not the dad doesn't really do much as far as being born goes. So there must have been something else.
He helped me when I was born. Now, that theory doesn't work, him being a bastard son.
Yeah.
If Joshua looks just like him, you would think
they both take after their father.
Well, that's still highly unlikely anyways.
Very unlikely.
So it's not like it's more unlikely, but anyway. I don't know.
That they would look the same. Yeah.
Right. But it's maybe would be more likely if at least the mother and father were the same.
At least.
If the mother was different.
Yes.
But I don't know. Anyway.
Interesting. Yeah, there's something there.
Then older Sydney begins taking on from there. He begins like finishing the statement of the younger boy, right?
Yeah.
He wanted the city destroyed, even if it meant his own death. Then he implored me, do not let them use it, the power. Stop him. Stop Guildenstern. So the Duke was telling Sydney, don't let these people use the power of the dark. now Sidney is telling Ashley, go stop Guildenstern because he's about to do that. He's like on the verge of doing that right now. Please stop him.
Yeah.
So kill him. You must stop him. Kill him before the dark sucks his living soul dry. And Ashley says, where is he? And Sidney just points, like up to the roof. And he says, Ashley, I'm. He doesn't finish that, and then Ashley just says, I know. And it just kind of cuts away. So Ashley heads to the rooftop to kill Guildenstern, but Guildenstern sacrifices Samantha's soul as the Phantom Soul.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
Now this is another.
Power.
This is another. Well, I'll bring it up later because there's no way I'll forget.
Yeah.
But that's wild, right? Because you just see them hugging, and then because the sound design in an older game like this it's good for its time, but you don't really know what's going on, right? So she's saying like she's just confused as to what's going on, and then the camera cuts back and you see the knife in her belly. I didn't know that he had stabbed her, at least initially. And then it's like, holy cow, because you knew how much, this is so interesting. This goes back to what Sidney had said in our last podcast episode, where Sidney was like, Samantha, you fool, you think you're in love, you have no idea what you're doing.
Yep.
And that's because Sidney can read Guildenstern's heart. And Guildenstern is not worried about Samantha. Like, he may like her, you know, and he may even love her in some way, but his heart is all about owning the city and the power of the darkness. Whereas when he would read Samantha's heart, it was all about him. It was all about Guildenstern.
His cause is more important to him than any other person.
Her. Whereas Samantha, it was a romantic, we're in this together kind of thing. Oh, I'm so excited. Let's go fight the world together. You know, that was her mind. And then in this moment, it's made painfully obvious that he's like, yeah, you were fun, you were cool, but I'm gonna become God now. So, like, I can't pass it up. So, and I'm not gonna kill myself. This is a big theme, I think, here as to what ends up happening with Guildenstern. He is not willing to sacrifice himself.
Yes.
He only is willing to sacrifice others, and that, well, it doesn't end well for him, right? Yeah. Whereas Sidney was always going about on this self-sacrificial.
He intends to die right from the beginning.
Early on, we knew that. Like, Sidney is willing to give his own life for whatever he's doing, right? Yeah. And that means that he truly believes it. Whereas Guildenstern is like, he's just playing a game. He's just trying to win the game. Yep. You know, he's just trying to get the most power.
Yep.
And that was what Rosencrantz was trying to do too. It's the same game, you know?
I love how you get a really good view here, even with the PlayStation 1 graphics, that the root inverse is the blood sin is just plastered. The skin.
I know, you can see the edges.
Like the difference in tone between Sidney's skin and Guildenstern's
subtle,
skin.
But you can tell.
And it's just like, oh my gosh.
It's so bad.
Crazy,
it's so gross. Dude. It's so bad.
And Samantha says, my love, why? And Guildenstern says, forgive me, Samantha. I need your soul. Our cause needs a martyr. And she says, your cause. There's no place for me for our dream. And he says, I love you, Samantha, as God is my witness. I thought this was really interesting because Guildenstern seems to be a very sincere person.
Yeah.
But it was just like Sidney said earlier, this path, this tyrant's path, will lead you to being utterly alone.
You kill the people you're closest to.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's exactly what's happening here. So maybe in some way, some warped way, he's telling the truth, or he's being sincere when he says that. Yeah. But it's not genuine, because if you really love someone, you're not going to do that to them.
Right.
But he had some level of care for her, and he does feel sorry he has to do this. Right?
Every dictator it's just like what do you call it? It's a relationship of like a don't make me do this kind of thing.
Yes, right.
Right, like an abusive relationship where it's like he feels like he has to do it where he doesn't.
And so, like, I love her response, though, because it puts it all in perspective. So you get that sentiment from him when he says, I love you, Samantha, as God is my witness. And she says, I too once thought so.
Yes, yes.
And then she kind of falls.
I love that. That's so good, because that shows that their bond is severed. That before she died, she fell out of love with him, which makes perfect sense given the situation, but it's actually really powerful. It's actually really powerful that the way that she dies, and in her final moment, she turns away from him, and that's how she leaves. That's how her soul leaves.
Really, really good. She falls, and then this is the moment that Ashley comes onto the roof, calls out, Guildenstern. And Guildenstern says, "Come, risk breaker, your death will be my rebirth."
And then he gets like shocked by that purple lightning.
Yep.
Just like,
That's the dark is imbued in him.
so he's getting like tons of power.
Also, did you notice the sword he's wielding?
Yes, it's a rood. Yeah,
it's the rood. It's that sword.
Yes,
That's the sword he's fighting you with.
Now, I had some musings on this symbol because I don't know what it really means, but my thinking was that you've got like two bones that mean death, right? And then at the end of each bone is a thorny rose, right? So you have 4 thorny roses, and the sword is stabbing at the importance of the rood going upwards is that you conquer death in an ascension, right? Upwards, right? And that you can conquer death and move upwards. But the rood inverse is the opposite, is going downwards, down to
Dying,
hell, right? Yeah. Now, and then the thorny rose represents the duality of life, the thorns and then the beauty, right?
That could be,
that was my, I looked online. Nobody has interpreted this
What
that I
that
could find.
means,
And
yeah.
it just in general at all. Like, what does this symbol mean? And so that's what I think it means. But as soon as he comes out there wielding it and it's just this clunky, like I thought it was cool that he had it, but it just looks like a wooden
just
like
like a
cross.
single tone.
Yeah, I was hoping it would be like
Elaborate.
a sheath, that the sword is still just a sword, that this isn't all part of the sword, you know.
Yeah.
It's part of the symbol, but the sword is separate, you know. So when he comes wielding the whole thing as though it's one big thing, I didn't love that because it messed with my unofficial interpretation of what that symbol means. Oh, which, by the way, I got to throw this out one more. Remember when I mentioned down in the wine cellar there were some designs on the wall that look like roots?
Yes.
I do still think that the root symbolism is a possibility there.
Yeah.
But upon further inspection, I actually think that they're thorns, not roots.
Okay.
And because you get the curve and then the straight and then the curve, and it seems like there's thorns. I feel like that's what led me to the rose, the thorny rose
right.
idea of the symbol, because they're doing this weird thing where they like curve around each other and then make almost a heart shape, right? But I feel like they're thorns, which represent what? Sin and death, I think, is what thorns tend to represent. But there's no rose right down there. Now, I don't know what that means for the game. The root symbolism seemed to work a little bit better, but I actually think they're thorns. So,
well, I really like especially that you use the word ascension, right? That the sword is cutting through death.
That's why
ascension,
it's important that it's pointing upwards.
because his last thing he says there before you fight him is, where was it? Oh, okay. "Come, risk breaker, your death will be my rebirth. Come help celebrate my ascension."
There you go.
Is
There
what
you
it
go.
says.
As he's holding the sword,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's not inverse, it's up.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got the inverse on his back, but he's holding it as a sword.
So he's ascending to this immortality.
And the idea is to conquer death, to kill death,
Yeah.
right? So you stab it, but you stab it upwards.
I love that, actually. I'm accepting that as my headcanon.
Sweet, there you go.
Okay, so after you beat him in that form, he actually drops that sword like down the castle or whatever. It like falls off the edge. And Ashley then sees this really trippy vision. He's like in a field of white. There's just whiteness everywhere.
Yeah.
And he's hearing kind of his own voice saying, "Forget that which pains you. You cannot reclaim what is lost to time. Let it go. There's only a regret here. What difference does it make? Whether you lost a wife or child or killed an innocent family, you cannot bring back the dead." Like either way, like you can't do anything about it.
Right,
Just
it's the
forget it.
past,
Let it go. Then we see like Guildenstern. Obviously this is an abstract, not the real Guildenstern, but some abstract representation in his mind happening.
Right.
He says, "Your hands are tainted with blood. Truth or not, your sins are eternal. Release the past, look to the future. Join us, Ashley." So this is the dark kind of talking to him, right? Because the dark, Guildenstern tried to accept it, but now the power is actually being passed to Ashley.
Yes, it seems,
Right? And so like Ashley is sort of conversing with the dark in the scene, is at least the way I read it.
Sure, yeah.
So, "Come home, there is no growth without birth. Without a foothold in the past, we cannot walk toward the future." And Ashley then says to that representation of himself, "Get thee gone, darkness." And it's then that he appears.
Which is what Jesus says, "Get thee hence, Satan," right? It's almost, he could have translated it that exact way.
He then appears back in the field again with the tree, and his son runs to him, and he apologizes to him. Marco is the boy's name, you know.
Yeah,
It must have been lonely here, I think he says. And then Marco says, "Nuh-uh, I'm brave like my papa," right? And then Ashley calls to his wife by name for the first time.
Right?
Tia is her name. Calls to her by name for the first time, and she says, "Welcome home, Ashley. You've done all you could for us. 'Twas a short time, but I knew happiness with you. You gave me a lifetime's worth of love." And Marco says, "Don't cry, Papa. I'm not crying, see?" And Ashley's
I like that line.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And then Ashley's like, "But this," you know, he's really struggling. And his wife lifts a finger to his lips. Like, "Don't be misled by others' words. Believe your heart. I love you, Ashley." And then they sort of disappear in this sparkling particle effect.
Mm-hmm.
So this is leaving this ambiguous. What actually happened in the past is left ambiguous, and people can kind of, you know, debate what they believe about it. Based on the fact that, like, Sidney could be lying either way, and it seems like in either, like he sort of implies one and then the other.
You have to rule him out.
It's hard to trust what he says.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that Rosencrantz was lying.
Yeah,
I
would
find
be
it
weird.
really hard to believe that
would be
Rosencrantz was lying.
And Rosencrantz seems to have, even before, well, because the skills that you have Leomond seems to enhance the skills you already have.
Yes.
Right, initially, right, when you enter into it. Which is why Merlose isn't just like this beastly fighter, you know, at that point.
Yeah.
And so Rosencrantz seems to have some innate resistance to
magic.
You know, magic in general, affecting his mind and all of that kind of stuff. He seems to see clearly and think clearly, even when everyone around him isn't and can't. So whatever he says is likely a correct recollection of events.
Except for when he's obviously lying, like when he's telling him, "Oh, the VKP sent me to like help you."
Yeah, I'm a risk breaker.
Clearly that wasn't true, but like, why would he lie
when he's
about
saying
being
that?
Ashley's partner in this?
Yes.
Like, why would he implicate himself and lie about that?
Right.
It just doesn't seem like something to lie
because
about.
it seems like he really does hold a grudge against Ashley.
Yeah, right.
And so it's like, well, that explains it, you know? That explains it. And once again, he lost his job again to Ashley here in Leomond.
Right.
And that just,
he
loses everything to Ashley, and then he tries to be the, what'd you call it? He tries to be the bearer of the blood sin. And then, but it ends up being Ashley again. And it's so funny. It's just at every point in his life, where Ashley's here and just keeps stepping on him. Yeah. So he clearly has this grudge, and that seems to be a reasonable explanation for it. So it's like, fair enough.
Yeah.
I think it's probably right.
The way, I guess the way that I choose to read this is that Ashley was the rogue, fallen jackal knight who killed an innocent family. It wasn't actually his wife and son.
Yeah.
But that
in his current state,
here he is dealing with the replaced memory. He's like coming to terms with that pain.
Sure.
And like and sort of like moving on from that.
Well, there wouldn't be any other way for him to deal with them as an abstract family that he murdered.
Yes.
Like, if he can think of them in terms of being his family, that gives like names and personalities and that kind of stuff that he can attach to it, whether they're real or made up, it doesn't matter. And then, whereas if it's just, oh, you killed this family, in his real memory, what probably maybe happened, he wouldn't have that. It would be harder for him to be able to resurrect them for a few moments to make peace with them before dying if he didn't have the names and the personalities to go with it, right? So even though they may have been created, they still represent that family that he killed. It just in an abstract way of being his wife and son.
Well, and this kind of goes to the whole concept of your own perception is your reality, right? Like we talked about this a lot in the Hellblade. In the Hellblade podcast. It's like the way that you perceive things, the way that you remember things. We talked a lot about memory
in last
earlier
episode
in the podcast.
No, 2 episodes ago.
Right? Like Ashley still has these memories. Whether they're fake or implanted by the VKP or not, he has them, and they're
irrelevant.
They're a
it's
part
irrelevant.
of his memory.
Yes.
They're a part of his perception of reality, and he has to deal with that.
Exactly.
He has to move past this. He has to work through the pain of that. And he still feels like he had a wife and son that were murdered, right?
Yeah.
Like he still has to resolve that conflict internally, whether it actually happened that way or not.
Yeah.
And so I see this scene as being more of that than it being like a confirmation that that was really the truth of what happened.
In some ways, I'd say the best argument that I can think of right now that was his wife and kid is that makes it smoother, that makes it simpler.
Yeah.
That where you don't have to use like deep psychoanalytics to, like we just did, to explain what that scene possibly could otherwise have meant in some other way that maybe makes more sense story-wise, but that the easier, like who is it? Occam's razor would say that, well, this is just, that was his wife and that was his son. But that just doesn't seem plausible in this situation. Yeah. So despite that being a more simple explanation, I think the more complex one actually addresses it properly.
Yeah. That's the way I see it anyways. I'll be looking forward to seeing what people say in the comments.
I agree.
He's pulled away from this vision by a voice that says, "Come home, Ashley Riot. Your story is not yet finished." Because you have to do boss fight part 2.
Because it's a video game, and every game, you can never just beat the boss once.
Particularly JRPGs. There's never just one phase of the boss.
Dude, final form. You gotta get all the way through all the forms.
This final form is a tough part of the fight too.
Is this the one with all the triangles, the stars around the head? Yeah, and the angel-looking thing.
Like the angel-looking
thing.
That's
pretty cool design.
He has that move where it's a really cool design.
Yeah.
There's that move where he'll like fly down and just like nuke the stage, and if you don't like do the, what do you call it, the defense art like with the right timing, you can like get one shot.
That timing is, I don't know if it's because of the emulator or not, but anyways, timing,
it's hard.
It's really hard.
It's
really hard. The timing thing I always had difficulty with, but I wonder if it would have been easier if I actually played it on actual PS1.
Yeah, there are ways to sort of play with it a little bit, because every time you pull up like your menu, right, it sort of pauses the game.
Yeah.
So like you can pause until he's like there.
Yes,
and then
I know that.
And then you can anyway. So there are ways to sort of like manipulate it, but it's still a really hard fight. Anyways, after you beat that form, the city begins to crumble in an earthquake. It's all collapsing. We see Hardin and Joshua and Merlose escaping through the wine cellar. This is what you were referring to, where Hardin is like
he's
carrying.
He's beasting it, man.
He's carrying like Joshua with him.
Yep, as if he had not been stabbed.
Yep. So they're getting out, and then we see Tierger and Neesa, and Tierger is imploring her to run away and tell people what happened, right? Mm-hmm. And he stays behind to fight now the fully zombied Grissom.
Yeah. And then the last line is, well, this shall make a fitting tomb for us both.
Yeah, he says, now the slowest dance, partner. 'Tis a fine tomb we shall have.
Yes.
Which is pretty hardcore. Or that we shall share.
Fine tomb that we shall share, yeah.
And then we see Ashley attempting to carry Sydney out of the city. He's like carrying him with him, right? And I love how the camera pans behind him. He's got like a very newly tattooed, very newly carved root inverse on his back.
In Ashley.
Yeah, Ashley's back.
Yeah, we have that now.
It's like, when you first get a tattoo, there's some bleeding, and it's like red and irritated. And inflamed, and that's what it looks like. It's like newly tattooed or carved into his back. But he's trying to carry Ashley out, but it looks like everything's crumbling and he's not going to get away. And so then it cuts back to Merlose outside the city as dawn is approaching, and she's accepting that, he didn't get out in time. Gods be with you, Riot.
Yeah. And
then Joshua tugs her to come over to where Hardin's at. He's dying now.
Yeah.
And Joshua speaks for the first time. No, Hardin, don't go, stay. And he says, you speak at last. The terror, I am sorry. So he's apologizing to Joshua for what he put him through.
Freaking him out.
Yeah. And then he sort of disappears with the slow particles.
Yeah.
Right? Like his body doesn't stay
He doesn't
behind.
become a zombie. Well, he's out of Leomond, and the magic of Leomond is kind of different after that point. So.
And then, Joshua runs to her and she embraces him, and as day breaks, it's a beautiful shot of the city in the background.
That was my note here. Dawn rises over the newly cleansed town, signifying a new beginning and hope for the future.
Yeah, really cool shot.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And then the final scene of the game. we cut to Duke Bardorba's secondary residence, where he was earlier in the game, where he was lying in bed, right? Greylands 1 week later. This is a week out. You see Ashley. I'm a little bit confused by this. I don't know if I quite have this right. So I'm sure Rob or somebody else will correct me in the comments. Ashley in his risk breaker garb. So the one he's been wearing the whole game, the assless chaps that
weird,
he wears.
Yes. the very interesting clothing, option.
You know, that he wears. You see him walk in, but then the camera sort of obscures him as he approaches the bed. And then when Duke Bardorba speaks, he says, "Well met, Sydney," and then it reveals that it's Sydney standing there.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a magical sound effect that they use for almost like a transformation kind of sound. And they use that again after this when he transforms into Merlose for a second. Same sound effect.
Right.
So what this I feel clearly insinuates is that Ashley is pretending or is disguised as Sydney. Okay, so don't worry. I was confused at the time of recording this, but as Kaysen and I discuss this and work through what happens, I realize what really happened here. This is not Ashley disguising himself as Sydney to give Duke Bardorba closure. It is Sydney disguising himself as Ashley to get into the manor to have closure with his father. And I will arrive at that conclusion by the end of this discussion Kaysen and I have. So don't worry, I'll get there. This is not actually Sydney. This is Ashley disguised as Sydney at Duke Bardorba's side.
Well, that's fascinating. That's interesting.
But
that makes me wonder what...
I don't understand. Okay, anyways, the next part.
Okay, yeah, let's say what happened. Because I have a lot of thoughts about this scene.
So the Duke says, "Well met, Sydney. So it is done. You have suffered much. I too have played my part. Let us leave the rest to this Ashley. He is the one you have chosen. I know what must be done." And then Sydney gives him a dagger, right?
Yeah.
And he says, "I was not much of a father to you. Forgive me, my son." They embrace, and then the Duke stabs him. I love how there's a glint in the Duke's eye, and it sort of falls like a tear a little bit as Sydney is stabbed and he's sort of dying and disappearing, right? So, if this is Ashley pretending to be Sydney, he's just doing this for the sake of...
So the Duke can have closure.
So the Duke can have closure.
Yes.
Right? But I kind of like it better if it's really Sydney and they're dying together.
I would like it if it was really Sydney as well.
So it's like, did Ashley get Sydney out of the city in time, or did he leave him there and then just disguise himself as Sydney for the scene? I don't know how to read that, because it seems clear to me with the use of that sound effect that Ashley is just disguising himself.
Yeah.
But I would like it so much better if Sydney got a chance to be with his father one last time.
Oh, absolutely.
And they died together. I feel like that would be such a great closure to their story.
Can Sydney still use magic after having...
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know how the rules work. Because it's been passed to Ashley now. Ashley's got the darkness. He's got the root inverse now.
Yeah.
It's been transferred. The legacy has been carried over to him. And he has all the powers that Sydney used to have in the beginning of the game when he disguised himself as Guildenstern and
when
things.
Sydney, did that same sound effect show when Sydney was Guildenstern?
I don't
but then
remember
turned around?
that far back, but maybe.
There was some sound effect, but I actually don't remember the sound effect you're referring to in this part either.
Yeah, so there's a sound effect right as the Duke calls out, "Well met, Sydney," and it looks up and reveals Sydney standing there, not Ashley. Because Ashley, in his vagrant garb, walked in. But Ashley, outside the Duke's manor a second later, is wearing black robes.
Yeah, he's wearing
So I'm confused as fetch.
Now, I would say, let's just keep it Sydney. Just keep it be Sydney, because that was better. That was more meaningful.
I like that better if it's really Sidney.
Yeah.
But then that would insinuate that Sidney disguised himself as Ashley to come
get in.
But then revealed he was actually Sidney, which could work.
Can Sidney just walk into the Duke's mansion? I wouldn't think he'd be able to.
I wouldn't think either of them could,
because he let Mullen. Oh, you're right.
Like because they're all investigating whether. Hold on.
Either way,
no,
it was Ashley.
I just put it together.
Okay, what?
Remember the Greylands incident report
Yes.
that I was referring to earlier,
where
they were saying Ashley is responsible for the murder of the Duke?
Right.
If Ashley walked into the room, but then it was actually Sidney disguised as Ashley.
Okay, you're right. You're right.
That's how they blamed Ashley for the murder of the Duke.
You are right about that.
And then the real Ashley was outside in the black garb, but Sidney disguised himself as Ashley to get in, but then revealed he was Ashley so he could have his last moment with his father.
You're right. That's 100% right.
I think that's what happened.
Because this whole game takes place in 24 hours, in one single day.
Yes, but then this is a week later.
I know.
This particular
That's
thing
the
is a
whole
week
point,
later.
though.
Yeah.
I play the game, and I'm thinking that, as with most games, it's hard to judge how much time has passed, but my assumption is a lot of time.
Yes.
No, in Vagrant Story, it is not a lot of time. It is 1 day.
Right.
The whole game is 1 day. And so that makes this plausible. So it's just 1 day after we show up in Leamond, then Sidney shows up as us to kill the Duke because the report was later anyways. That's it. I think you got that.
Yes.
I think you figured that out.
report saying that Ashley is at large, like we don't know what happened
was
to
a
him.
week after
we need to
Greyland's
find
incident.
him. They're not saying, oh, we need to go to Leamond to find him. They're saying we don't know where he is, but we got to find him because he's the only one who knows what happened here. And the last time he was seen was at the Duke's manor, and so he's being...
Which manor,
he's
though?
a suspect.
This was the Duke's second residence.
House, but he's a suspect in the murder of the Duke. The Duke was still alive before the Leamond incident.
Yes.
He only died a week after.
So that's true. With the fact that they're saying that the Duke was assassinated at all is weird.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But then as soon as this moment happens and then the knife is on the floor, because the knife drops after it was put into Sidney, then he disappears and the knife falls.
Yes.
Although
so Ashley would have been able to get in because the Duke might have called for him to come or something like that.
Yeah.
Knowing Sidney could transform. Anyways.
He hadn't been accused of killing the Duke yet.
Yeah, Ashley was not a suspect yet, which is why he would have been able to get in as Ashley and then reveal he's actually Sidney.
That's crazy.
That's what it is.
So that's what happened. I think you're right on that. Now, do you have anything more to say about that?
Well, then just the next scene is outside, Ashley standing there dressed in black, watching the manor. Yeah. And some soldier just comes walking up like, who walks there at this hour? What's your business? Show your papers. And he turns around, that transformation sound effect plays, and it's Merlose, but in the same black robes, right? Callum Merlose, VKP Inquisitor, shows her like badge, basically.
Yeah, so he has her papers as well. That's interesting.
Oh, my lady, I beg your forgiveness. It's no matter. You're merely doing your duty. Thank you, my lady. And he like walks away. And then Ashley turns back into himself, and he walks into the darkness, right? And it ends on, and so began the story of the Wanderer, the Vagrant. And it says the Phantom Pain, which is the title of this story, the story of Vagrant Story, this particular section of this world's history. Yeah. It's referred to as the Phantom Pain. And then I love how the credits are done like a film. That was my last.
Oh, yeah, where they show the images and...
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool.
And there's like starring Ashley Riot and Sidney
I love that,
stuff like that.
That was great.
So that was kind of cool. What was your note?
So, well, I had a couple. One of them in particular is the moment with Sidney and the Duke. So Sidney goes in and he and the Duke have a moment together. And Sidney, at first I was thinking Sidney gives the Duke the knife because the Duke can kill himself. Yes. Right? But it was so that the Duke could kill him, so that Sidney could die.
Yes.
So I contrast this moment with Guildenstern and Samantha, right? Because they also had embraced, and then he stabbed her. She was an unwilling participant there. She did not give herself willingly, and he wouldn't either. Neither of them were willing to make a sacrifice for what they were doing, right? And that may have factored into their will in the end, But then you have Sidney and the Duke. and they come together in an embrace, but they're both willing to sacrifice.
Yes.
And that leads to what I would consider to be an ascension, but to peace, right? Where
Yeah.
they can die in peace, whereas the other two who were unwilling to accept death end up, in hell.
Yeah.
And then Sidney and the Duke are able to transcend life because they accepted death, right?
Right.
And that was a big deal. But contrasting those two moments, the way that the two people died in an embrace, I thought that was fascinating. That was very interesting.
Yeah, I really liked it.
Yeah.
The story of this game is fantastic.
It's extremely good.
Absolutely love the story of this game.
Yeah, I love it. Man, this would be like just a great movie. Just a good...
So I was going to comment on that. If you're just watching the cutscenes on YouTube, this is including the credits. It's about 2 hours, 17 minutes.
Oh, nice.
Just the cutscenes.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That, you tack on 30 to 45 minutes of fights and exploration of the city a little bit to show him going from place to place and fighting against bosses and things like that.
Yeah.
This could be
got a 3-hour flick.
like a 3 or 2.5 or 2:45 movie.
Yeah, and it would be very
It
good.
would, and you could
Very
almost
good.
remake it shot for shot.
Yeah,
you wouldn't have
that's
to
true.
change anything.
Oh man, didn't we have some idea about doing a shot-for-shot remake of one scene from this game years ago?
That was kind of an idea of where we wanted to take Dark Pixel before we moved on from it.
Yeah.
Was that we were like, okay, let's just do shot for shot live action versions of different video games.
I feel like Vagrant Story came across the...
This is one that I really wanted to do on top of Shadow of the Colossus and
Resident Evil 4.
Resident Evil 4's opening.
Ninja Gaiden.
Ninja Gaiden,
which we filmed.
We made but didn't release.
Anyways.
So that was kind of the direction we were thinking going at Dark Pixel. I still really want to do that. Yeah. I don't know how or when.
Maybe one day.
To come up with like the resources and time and people to do it. But it would be a really cool YouTube channel.
Yeah, it would.
So anyway, this would be a great game to pull for. But I mean, the costumes, we'd have to basically shoot on green screen and recreate castles and things.
Almost everything.
But if we could do that, if we could find a way to find a studio where we could have just green walls everywhere,
dude, that'd be sweet.
and you get good costumes made, like we could totally just maybe do the opening scene of Vagrant Story.
Yeah.
Super sweet. Okay, so a couple things I want to do before we wrap up here. First of all, somebody was bringing up to us, I hope they go over the room names. So each time you go into a room in this game, they have really interesting names to them, right? I don't really have much to say about that, which is why I wasn't planning on bringing it up. It's just kind of like, oh, that's an interesting thing, but I don't know if there's any real profundity or reason why they did
some meaning.
But Alex O. Smith does talk about this a little bit in his interview with US Gamer. Let's see. The question was, this is a pretty dense script for being a relatively short game. Are there any subtleties that you think players have overlooked in any of the characters? Now, Rich, the editor, says, I can't speak to the characters, but for the dungeon rooms themselves, each of the names was handcrafted by Alex and packed with homage to interesting and mutually beloved things. Also, I think we tucked a reference to the Eye of Argon away somewhere in there. But then Alex responds and says, yeah, the room names were a fun challenge because the Japanese names were very long and we didn't have anywhere near the space in English to directly translate, which gave me free rein to translate very, very loosely.
Nice.
I took a cue from Matsuno's many homages to Queen songs and lyrics. So Matsuno's a very big fan of Queen. And that's been, March of the Black Queen.
Oh, nice.
And even in Final Fantasy Tactics, there are references to Queen, kind of all over his games. So knowing that, right, he sort of tried his best to translate these in very abbreviated ways. Okay, so further down, he gives some samples of this. So the direct translation, if he were to directly translate this room name, it would have been Mineshaft, where someone spent all their strength for the one they loved. That would be the whole name of the room.
Yeah, and I can kind of reverse that into English or into Japanese a little bit to where it's hey, it's not as long as it sounds.
Yeah.
In Japanese, it wouldn't be as long as it sounds in English when translated out.
Yeah. It's like a whole sentence, a whole phrase is the name of the room. So he took mine shaft where someone spent all their strength for the one they loved and turned it into the passion of lovers. Right.
Yeah, makes more sense.
The next one, stairway where someone danced a dance of joy after drinking cheap wine. He turned to Bacchus is cheap. Direct translation, stairway where someone collapsed from overwork. He translated to work then die. So he did that for all those room names. So that's why they have those really interesting names for all the rooms in the game. This game actually has a really good map system. I don't know how much you used it in your playthrough of the game, but like, it's got like full 3D rotation.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It actually reminds me. I don't know if you played Metroid Prime, but it's a
nope.
This came before Metroid Prime, obviously, but the map is very similar to that. It's like
Nice.
each room has like, it's like a wireframe almost.
Yeah, yeah.
Of like the shape of the room, and they're like, it shows all the rooms that connect and hallways that connect to it, and you can rotate around it like in any direction.
That's pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah,
Because a lot of times you have to go backwards
Right.
and like retrace through all the rooms and stuff.
So yeah, really good map system in this game. Anyways, I just wanted to bring that up because somebody was asking us, hey, can you touch on this? So that's that. The last thing I wanted to touch on was that this Shmuplations article interview that I talked about in the first episode. We talk a lot about theme and things like that when we're sort of talking about these games and their stories and breaking them down. I just wanted to, in fairness and in an attempt for accuracy, give some of Matsuno's own words regarding what he feels about theme and what his thought process actually was in making these games, so that we're not like asserting those things on his behalf.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
Now, it's totally valid to pull your own meaning from it or your own interpretation of what it means. But I think it is important to, at least in the artist's own words, like, if the guy didn't have a theme in mind, you should at least say that, right?
Yeah, at least make it known that the theme was not done on purpose. It may still be there, but it wasn't done on purpose.
So the interviewer asks, I can see you've assembled quite the talented staff. However, from everything I've heard, your contributions as the unifier is a huge part of what makes your games what they are. If, as you say, you don't begin with an initial vision for a specific game or world you want to create, then where do you find the motivation to throw yourself into a single development for nearly 2 years? And he says, I don't know. I mean, when it comes to making games, I'm content to putter along at my own pace, so the long development time doesn't bother me much. But as for my motivation, if I had to say, it would be the internet that motivates me. The internet is connecting the world more and more these days, and players are writing reviews for all sorts of games online. I get sucked into stuff like that easily, so I always read them. And when I see criticism about our games, it makes me want to fix those flaws in whatever we're working on now. Go ahead.
That may have been a good thing to do back 20 years ago, but don't read all the reviews in 2022 and don't take them as advice and then go try to fix them.
Because,
you'll freaking kill yourself.
You'll just be appealing to the minority, and that's not a good idea.
Exactly.
He says, to go back a bit, after we finished Ogre Battle, Quest was experiencing a staff shortage, and I had to do the user support by myself. People would call in and say stuff like, this game doesn't make any sense. Who's responsible for this mess? Put him on the line.
That's so funny.
And I'd respond, I'm sorry, that would be me. In this way, for 4 long months, I got to hear it all straight from the horses' mouths. Psychologically, it was exhausting, but it was also a good learning experience. I applied the things I learned from that in our next game, Tactics Ogre, and likewise after that, I built on the feedback for Tactics Ogre when I made Final Fantasy Tactics. With FFT, however, the more critical feedback really caught my attention, and Vagrant Story reflects that a lot, I think. I was determined not to make the same mistakes again. The interviewer asks, you also help write the setting and story for your games. Did you ever want to be a writer or director when you were growing up? And he says, I did want to make movies once, but the motivation for that wasn't really related to what you're talking about now. When I made Ogre Battle, Quest was a tiny company, so I had to do much of the planning and other work myself, by necessity. It was just an accident of fate that the writing I did was well received, and that I was able to continue doing it. I know, right? I'm going to get into that. Personally, as far as writing stories and scenarios is concerned, to be honest, I'm keenly aware of my own limitations, and even now, if possible, I prefer not to do much of that kind of work if I can avoid it. During the development of FFT, I actually had wanted to create the battle system myself, but we had Hiroyuki Ito on the team, the guy who had created the active time battle system and job system for Final Fantasy series, so it didn't make sense for him to write the story. I asked to do the battle system from the start, but ultimately, being short-staffed, I had to write the story, again, by necessity. And the interviewer asks, what kind of story did you want to tell with Vagrant Story? He says, I'm really bad with questions like this. With Final Fantasy Tactics, I think I really wanted to create my own version of Final Fantasy. I saw Final Fantasy as a kind of morality tale adventure story. For Vagrant Story, my first concept was to have 2 hours worth of event scenes strewn throughout the game. That's almost perfectly what it is.
Yeah.
My image wasn't so much of a big Hollywood movie as it was a 2-hour Tuesday evening suspense drama. I wasn't thinking we'd make something with all these heavy and pretentious themes. I wanted to make it more lighthearted and easy to digest. There was one thing I knew I didn't want. Even though we were always going to tell a complete story, I didn't want to draw the conclusion for players. I wanted to make a game where, from all the different experiences you have as the player or protagonist, you create the conclusion, what it all means for yourself. I thought we'd try a more fragmentary approach this time, where players are simply presented with bits of information and they have to weave it together into a narrative themselves. In that sense, the question of whether Ashley's memories are true or not, that is something I didn't want to give an answer to. I just wanted to tell the tale. So they left it ambiguous on purpose, right? So leaving things ambiguous was your way of posing a question to the player. Some people will criticize that approach, saying the story feels incomplete or half-baked. It's a valid approach to storytelling in cinema, though, so I feel like it should be valid in games as well. You mentioned that you see Vagrant Story as a Tuesday evening suspense drama, but I feel that, as with your previous games, there are heavy themes strewn throughout, hidden within the background of the story. Has that been done at your behest? And he says, well, it's interesting. The truth is the themes I've included in my games have usually reflected the people and the situations I was working in at the time. We talked about this a little bit in FF Tactics, right?
Yeah.
For example, in Final Fantasy Tactics, the theme of the class-based society of nobles and commoners that came about was when I joined Square. As you can imagine, there were individuals that were like royalty, their talent and the social capital they had amassed. It made me doubt whether someone without those gifts could ever succeed there, no matter how hard they tried. And those ideas found their way into the game. For Vagrant Story, I had experienced personally the way in which information and facts can change so dramatically depending on who is conveying that information. Everyone interprets things in a way that is most favorable to their own circumstances. This time I wanted that to be more than just a simple theme. I wanted the very structure of the story to reflect that idea.
Well, that's fascinating.
It's funny because he is being very modest. There's other places in the interview where he downplays his own role. It's my staff. They're the creative ones. I'm just the unifier. I'm just the guy who puts it all, that makes sure that they're on the same page with each other, but they're the creative ones. He says, I don't write for pretentious themes, but then he basically tells you exactly what the game's theme is right here. And in the other interview with Alexander Smith, there's like 2 or 3 times where he shouts out Matsuno and his brilliance as a storyteller.
Oh, really? Nice.
So it feels to me like he's trying not to be pretentious or believe too much in his own ability or to be arrogant or something.
In some ways, that's a very Japanese thing to do. To be very humble and to be very anytime you get a compliment, to say no, instead of thank you, right? Yeah. If you compliment someone in Japan, if you speak Japanese and you go to Japan and you compliment someone, they will not say thank you. Yeah. They will say no, and then they will compliment you. They'll deny the compliment and return the favor. Right. So this is so funny because when I was learning Japanese, one of the first things that they'll teach you is how to say something, what a Japanese person is likely to say to you. One of the most common things you will likely hear in Japan, whether it's true or not, is, wow, your Japanese is so good, right? And the proper response to that is not thank you. Yeah. The proper response is, no, I'm just trying, I'm just learning. Yeah, that's the proper response. Right. But most Americans would say thank you. And Japanese people will look at that and be like, okay.
Yeah, your Japanese accent
It's not
sucks.
how their culture works. Exactly. They don't want to tell you, but it's actually pretty bad.
Yeah. So the interviewer goes on to say, fascinating. We can see your life in the history of your games then. And Matsuno says, I see it as a kind of spice for the stories, in the same way that pepper brings out the flavor in a bowl of ramen. But the pepper itself, those thematic ideas, if you asked me if they had some particularly deep meaning on their own, I'd say no, not at all. So, that being said, I really do see this part of it.
Me too. Multiple times in our discussion, we have brought up the idea that the news is about perspective and that history is about, whatever competing idea happened to win, as opposed to an actual journalistic narrative of the true facts, Yeah.
Yeah, and so, as he says here, everyone interprets things in a way that is most favorable to their own circumstances, right? And that information and facts can change so dramatically depending on who is conveying that information.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads to the whole question of whether Ashley killed the innocent family or whether his family was killed.
Right.
And he's not supposed to give you an answer to that question in the game. You're supposed to kind of piece that together. And there are reasons to think that Sidney was lying about him killing people.
Right.
It's hard for me to believe Rosencrantz did that, to see the motivation behind him lying there, or even knowing that that
Sidney was lying.
That Sidney planted that lie in the first place.
Yeah.
However, the idea is that they then plant the idea that Sidney lies, and Ashley realizes this, so maybe he's lying to me about this. So it's meant to be ambiguous. Anyway.
Yes. And the point of a story like this that's set within a mythos, right, is never to give you a fact-based, materialistic, journalism writing of the actual facts as they actually happened, point by point.
Yeah.
That's never the point of stories, just in general, of any story, right? Anytime you watch the news or you read something that is supposed to be factual, but it happens to fit a narrative structure, like a really nice story, it's probably not true. Yeah. It's probably that the elements that fit the story are purposefully handpicked and selected and then pushed as a story to get people to be more interested, because we love stories, right? But we want to see stories. We look for stories and things. But a story is almost by definition not the actual objective fact of what happened. Yeah. That's not what a story is, nor what it can be, because there's too many facts to choose from. A story is the meaningful few facts being, what's the word? Not abstracted. Siphoned.
I know what you mean. Yes.
Taken out and then lined up in a way that plays with your emotions the way that they want you to feel.
Right.
That's what a story is.
Yeah.
And the actual things that happened, there's an infinity of them, right? There's too many atoms to have possibly focused on, but the ones that we find most meaningful are the ones that we talked about. It's that's how story works, but that's how our brains work. And so we're trying to understand the objective world through stories, and stories may not be the best tool for that.
Yeah.
But they're great for storytelling, so there we go.
Yeah.
And he seems to understand that very well.
I think he does.
Yeah, and the way he and the few, and that's why he's so good with short scenes, telling a story in a very concise way, is because he's taking out all of the irrelevant details. He's only taking what is important, what we would believe is important and what matters, what's meaningful, and he's just conveying that in every scene, in every cutscene, and we get a very good story that's actually pretty dang short. Right, all things considered. It's like just watching a movie. It's a 40-hour game, but then it's like the story, it could be condensed into a 2-hour film. And that's really good.
So the last thing I want to do before we wrap up is just go over a few comments that have been left and kind of respond to them, because there have been some really good ones left on the first 2 episodes. Rodrigo Hartman said, for some reason I always imagined Ashley was being ironic instead of braggish about him being the reinforcements, as in, nope, I'm all they're willing to throw at this problem. Not like, I am the reinforcements, but like, are you kidding me? You think there are reinforcements coming? It's just me.
Right. I mean, that thought crossed my mind as well.
Yeah. And this guy says, yep, this is a Diego Soto Miranda, saying, yep, because Ashley's personality after that scene wasn't cocky or bragging to me, more like cold and focused, And considering how high the stakes are in this game and his memory loss, I doubt that he has that piece of cake demeanor. So like he's not being like, I am the reinforcements.
So were this line to come at the end of the game, that's true. The fact that it comes at the beginning of the game before we know anything about
that's
Ashley's character is probably in part why people would read it that way. So, you read it knowing his character better, you would read it differently.
Well, the funny thing is that almost nobody probably saw this because they wouldn't have left the start screen
Let it just
low
go.
for two, or actually it's just, I guess it's the first one, but anyways, if you just start the game, you don't even see the scene at all, right? So, anyways, I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it, and I think that that's probably right. Like, Ashley is not the kind of person who would brag or like be like, like I am the reinforcements. That's probably meant to be read more like this is all we're getting. Like, it's me, I'm it. Like, we got to take care of the situation. More read in that way, right? Okay. There were a lot of people. There was maybe one person who said, yeah, this is cool, do it this way. And there was probably like 15 people who said,
want that dev history.
Oh, I liked the before when you did a more, like some people even said, I would watch the first episode, but maybe not the later ones because I wasn't playing the game with you and hadn't played the game.
Oh,
but I
that's
at least
interesting.
really wanted to know the dev history of the game to see if it would be something I'd be interested in playing.
Yeah.
So that could account for some of the reasons why those first episodes are higher viewed than the later ones, because it's just, I'm just checking this to see. I know they're not going to talk about the game so much quite yet. I just want to see what it's all about. So I'm trying to decide whether or not this feedback, we just talked about whether we take feedback or not is a good idea.
We'll have to talk about
whether
that.
this feedback is something we should take into account. Maybe we're trying to fix something that wasn't broken in a sense.
Yeah, that's possible.
And so we're going to think about that. We'll discuss it and we'll talk about it. We hear you though. I've seen the comments. There were quite a few people saying, I really wish that you would just do the dev history episodes like you used to do. I liked that better as an opening.
Yeah.
And there was lots of people saying that. So just wanted to say I saw that. Okay, so I think this guy's responding to you. Sanji Tailaxion. It was about the idea of freedom of religion being like a modern sort of concept, but applied to this medieval setting kind of a thing. He said, to be honest, the idea of freedom of religion isn't new. Just a nitpick, the Persian Empire and a few other older establishments defended a freedom of religion to a degree. Some so long as there was no like worship of icons or other such limitations from ruler to ruler and the region in question. So I don't know. I'm not a history buff. So
this is how Egypt was too. Egypt would allow people to keep their gods when they came to Egypt.
Yeah.
There's something there. It's not, I wouldn't say that that's freedom of religion, though.
In the same sense that...
That's more like freedom of culture and with strict limitations on what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. It's different from the idea of freedom of religion of you can be any religion and practice whatever you want. Especially as he gives some of the ideas of, well, just don't do any idols. Well, it's like, okay, but my religion has idols, so...
It's not actually freedom of religion in that sense.
But that is actually, I do take the point that there's some difference, but that it's not like every ancient empire forced everyone to be the same religion every time. Some did, but not all of them.
Yeah.
So fair enough, that's a good point.
So we got Rob here. He says, the impression I get from the prelude scene in the darkened room is that the three characters around the table are the only ones that are supposed to be there. The reason it seems so cloak and dagger is because the people in the dark are the members of parliament that are wanting to oust Duke Bardorba from his shadowy position of control and are influencing the VKP to make this happen. While there is an official record of the meeting, I doubt they were actually recording anything not said by the main three. So the idea here being like, Parliament is in the room, but this is like VKP offices or something. They're not supposed to be there, but they're trying to like get the Duke out We don't want the Duke to like rule us anymore. How can we like change the situation? In the shadows, we'll meet with the CIA and find a way to like oust him. That's like his idea of why they're in the darkness.
Interesting. I like that. Actually, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. From what is said at the meeting, I got the impression that the Crimson Blades are the Cardinal's personal force, with the Templars being a separate group that answers to the Church as a whole, and it should have been the Templars who would have dealt with incidents such as this. The Crimson Blades' involvement is seen as unusual not because they did not consult with the VKP, but because they were there in the first place or at all.
Right, they shouldn't have been there at all.
Yeah, so it's like he's separating the Templars and the Knights of the Church from the Crimson Blades, which is also part of the Church, but they're like a separate thing. And it's like the Templars should have addressed this problem. Why are the Crimson Blades doing it? Is kind of the distinction he's making there.
Okay.
He also says Merlose is not an experienced field agent,
right,
which is why she was left behind twice. So when she tells Ashley to wait for reinforcements, she is simply not fully cognizant of just what kind of a thing a risk breaker is expected to accomplish. Ashley is not bragging, nor is he being ironic. He is being matter of fact. Ashley basically is Solid Snake. One riot, one ranger. The Ultimania goes into detail on risk breakers and how Ashley is on another level, even from the rest of them. So that would be something to look into as well.
Cool.
Again, another reading of it. One guy was thinking maybe he's being ironic about it. He's thinking, no, he's just being matter of fact. Like,
he's just saying, I am the reinforcements.
This is it. We're not getting reinforcements. Time to go in, right?
Sure.
Oh, this was pretty interesting. And I haven't gone back and listened to this yet. But Irk123456 says, on the subject of Vagrant Story's soundtrack, something I didn't notice until I added it to my work playlist is that Rosencrantz has a leitmotif that sounds like a more chaotic version of the theme that plays during flashbacks to Ashley's past. It's also the Lizard Man boss theme, but I'm not sure if that's intentional.
Well, the Lizard Man thing, no, probably not. Yeah. But in terms of being part of Ashley's past, that's fascinating.
Yeah, because cool. Rosencrantz was part of Ashley's past.
He was there.
He was there, right?
He was literally there. That's his past, too.
Yeah, that would be a really cool way to tie Rosencrantz to Ashley's past with the music, to tell the story with the music.
Oh, that'd
be
a
nice leitmotif there. So that was really interesting. So Heon says here, just a small point. Agent, as meaning deputy or representative, is from all the way back in 1590s.
Oh, sick. I didn't know that.
In the sense of a spy or secret agent.
Which I think is how they're using it here.
Is attested by 1916.
1916,
So he says the term agent of the crown, for example, has existed for a very long time. As such, agents would occasionally be what we today could think of as spies anyways, hence the modern derivative.
Ah, cool.
In this sense, while risk breakers being agents in the latter sense is a modern usage of the word still carries with it enough classic context and appropriate meaning to function as a kind of, they could have used it in this way without standing out much, in my opinion. So, I thought that was an interesting
Hey, that's
point.
actually cool. I like that.
Let's do like one or two more here. And then, of course, because this is a couple weeks ahead, right? Anything that you guys put into the comments on this final episode or later episodes, we'll try to address when we have time by just responding in the comments, right? Okay. So he says, on to the episode here, there may have been some misunderstanding about the pursuit of Sydney from Kaysen, or perhaps from both of you. Merlose and Ashley did not separate at the Duke's Manor and rejoin here at the outskirts of the city. Ashley learned that Sydney was going to Leomond, right, because he was there when they were talking about it, during their confrontation, and relayed this to Merlose off-screen, and then they went there together. I think we had said something like, how did Merlose learn?
They met there. It seemed like they met there incidentally.
Yes.
But Rod is saying that it wasn't. It was not incidental.
So Ashley learned that Sydney was going to Leomond during their confrontation, relayed this to Merlose off-screen. They went there together. It is clear that they were not meeting up there, but just checking out different spots after they arrived.
Right, because she was like, how's it down there? That makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense.
In the first episode, Kaysen seemed confused about her, or how Merlose figured out where Sydney went. She didn't. Ashley told her, and she told him where it is, or what and where it is. Because he didn't know what Leomond was. So he's like, they said something about Leomond. She knows where Leomond is. They go there together, is what he's saying, right? He also says, this was just some wording issues here. Back to the framing device, you keep saying that Ashley has been blamed for the Duke's murder, but this seems like an incorrect use of the word. It seems to imply that he was framed or that he's a scapegoat, but the presentation of the story implies that he is genuinely believed to be responsible as the suspect of the Duke's murder. So calling him a suspect rather than being blamed for it would probably be...
Sure.
That's kind of what I meant, but anyway.
Yeah, but no.
The question is implied to be, did Ashley really murder the Duke and why? More than who framed him for murdering the Duke and why. I can certainly see how you'd come to this conclusion, though, from the way the framing device of FF Tactics worked. No, I was just saying he's being blamed for it, but what I meant is, anyways, yes, I get it. Any other things? Okay, I'll just read this last one. While Kaysen is geeking out over the architectural design, I just want to note how there is good world building between cutscenes to be found in item descriptions. There are various accessories and gems that reference tactics or the wines with their descriptions, but my favorite piece is the beaded anklet accessory. Anklet worn by Mullenkamp, a dancer, and the head priestess of ancient Kiltia. It is very far into the game that you find this item, but all of a sudden the opening FMV makes sense. From why is there a belly dancer in this intro to aha, that's who the belly dancer was. And you can indeed see her beaded anklet during those close-ups on her feet. You immediately broke down why she was there in the first episode, but from the game itself you only find out this information by finding that accessory. Just as how you only know that the Davos Dow and Merid caused the great earthquake. Those are the names of the summons that created the earthquake that destroyed Laemon.
I have a question about that I just remembered.
Yeah.
Was Duke Bardorba responsible for the earthquake 25 years ago?
I don't know. That is a good question.
Because he had the key, right?
Yeah.
He only passed it on to Ashley or to Sydney later.
What did she say about that? Because she talked about these summons that came and buried it, and there's the earthquake in the water that came in, right? Hello, it's me again, in post, trying to do some research on whether Duke Bardorba was involved in this earthquake that killed the citizens of Laemond 25 years before the Greylands incident. Here's what the wiki says about it. The dark tainted Laemond and the Parliament wished to control it. So I remember this because this is kind of what Rosencrantz was talking about earlier before we entered the Snowfly Forest. He was implicating that Parliament was involved somehow in feeding souls, right? And that they killed the people of Laemond. So my first thought was, Parliament was involved. Duke Bardorba 25 years ago certainly would have been in the Parliament, perhaps a leading member of the Parliament. Maybe he was responsible for this, but I don't know that for sure, because it goes on to say, the dark-tainted Laemond and the Parliament wished to control it, deciding to empower it by feeding souls to it. In a devious scheme 25 years before the Greylands incident, the Water Diva Merid and the Earth Diva Dow were summoned to cause a catastrophic earthquake that killed the citizens of Laemond. Summoned by who is the question, right? I think we can for sure say it was summoned by Parliament, but was Duke Bardorba involved in that decision? That's the part that I don't know about. The souls of the dead were consumed by darkness, and the phantoms, beasts, and the undead roamed the empty city, now separated from the major landmass. Duke Bardorba, who holds the legacy of Mullenkamp, the Grand Grimoire, refuses to let darkness be misused. As a result, House Bardorba was antagonized by the nobles, who ordered an investigation on its relation to the cult to wrest the Duke's hold on the key. So I don't know. I could see this going either way. In one sense, I could see Duke Bardorba not being involved in this somehow, and that's why Parliament is coming after him to get the key from him. On the other hand, I could see this being that Duke Bardorba was involved, and that's what he feels so bad about. That's what Hardin was referring to when he was saying that the Duke
that the Duke is afraid he's going to pay for the sins of this life in the next. I think that's the way Hardin put it. And if he's talking about this incident, that Bardorba was in part responsible, or maybe the primary decision maker of Parliament, who fed the city of Leomond with the souls of its citizens by summoning these divas, right? If Bardorba was involved in that decision, then I could see why he would feel so guilty and why he would feel the need to atone by keeping the key away from those who want to misuse it, namely Parliament, the VKP, the Cardinal, the Church, the Crimson Blades, all of those people. He's trying to keep the key away from them. And that's what Sidney is trying to help him to do. And that he feels like doing that will in some way help atone for this incident. So I could see that being the case. I don't know if there's an official answer somewhere. I'll look for that in the comments if anybody has an answer to that. But I think that's the way that I'm leaning towards right now. That is the reason why Bardorba feels so guilty.
Anyways, interesting details. I think that's all we're going to have time for today. But we will keep an eye on the comments when this goes live, particularly since it's the last episode. And we'll discuss stuff with you there. So thank you for joining us for Vagrant Story. Again, I don't know as of this moment what the next game will be, but it will very likely either be Final Fantasy X or Chrono Cross.
Yeah.
Chrono Cross Remastered comes out very soon. As for when this goes live, maybe like a week out. Mm-hmm. So it'd be cool if it ended up being that, but we are at the patrons' mercy on this, and it seems some of them are really tired of Final Fantasy X losing these polls, so it may end up being that. But in any case, thanks for watching, thanks for supporting us, and we will see you guys again next week. Peace out.